research and recognized the signs of coronavirus after a trip to New York. But this is the story of how, after many desperate days trying, Dr. Bohorik still doesn't know for sure if she has it.
By March 9th, I was really feeling sick, and at that point, I really suspected that I might have the coronavirus. So I called my primary care physician, and I told their office that I thought that I needed to be tested.
First, after her own doctor assessed her and thought she should have a test, the local health department told her she couldn't. She didn't fit the criteria because she hadn't had confirmed contact with someone who tested positive and hadn't traveled to a so-called high-risk country like Iran.
I said, look, this is kind of crazy. I mean, how are we ever going to find out if there's coronavirus in our community if we're not testing people and if we're only testing people based on this limited criteria?
Dr. Bohorik's fatigue and chest pains got worse, so she persevered. She drove an hour to see a nurse at a testing site in a neighboring county.
So she came in a few minutes later and said, no, we're not going to do the coronavirus test. And I said, why not? She said, well, because you haven't traveled to Iran. I'm serious.
She was sent away with antibiotics that haven't helped. Last week, finally, her family doctor spoke to the clinician in charge at the nearest emergency ward, who assured him she would get a test if she went there.
Hi, doggy. Hello.
Dr. Bohorik went to St. Joseph's Hospital, where they now found she'd developed pneumonia in her left lung, which could be associated with the coronavirus, and decided she should indeed have the test. That was last Tuesday. She was told she would hear the result in 3 to 5 days, but they say that's now 10 days because of the pressure on the system.
I still don't know whether I have coronavirus, and I still have symptoms. And, you know, my friends on Facebook or calling me that were exposed to me, they want to know, was I positive or negative?
In the days after she now thinks she got infected, Dr. Bohorik attended jury duty with dozens of other prospective jurors, and the very next day she went to the funeral of a friend.
There were like between 50 and 75 people that were at that funeral, and I hugged a bunch of my friends and families, and so I potentially exposed just in those 2 days at least 150 people.
There are stories like Claudia Bohorik's coming from right across the U.S. The health secretary of Pennsylvania told me that a shortage of kits, particularly early on, but even now, has meant they simply can't test everyone they want to try to contain the spread of the virus. Dr. Bohorik is getting through these tough times at home by using a machine to help her breathe that she got after previous health issues. She says, though, this has all left her frightened about the way the spread, as she sees it, is going untraced and unchecked.
The BBC's Elaine McBall. The owners of a cruise ship stranded off the coast of Panama are rushing to transfer healthy passengers to another ship after 4 people died on board and 2 others tested positive for coronavirus. More than 130 people on the Zandam have reported flu-like symptoms. And our star reporter Henry Bello about the conditions on the ship.
One passenger described this as a nightmare situation on the boat. People haven't stepped foot on land for 2 weeks. Some of them have been locked down in their rooms with no social contact for a week now. Really, the only contact they have with people outside their rooms are from crew and staff who are giving them food, essential items like fresh linen. And we've heard from one passenger on the ship, Sarah Fletcher. She was actually sunbaking on the deck of this ship when she heard the announcement from the captain saying everybody needs to return to their room immediately because there has been this rise in illnesses and symptoms that we've seen in COVID-19 cases. She says that people are frightened, people are anxious, they're scared about what's going to happen, how long they'll be on the ship. But she, like so many people across the world, are trying to maintain some sense of routine in their daily lives.
We're being well fed, plenty of clean linen, and there's a new TV channel with exercisers and quizzes, and some of the ship's entertainers are doing their concerts on that. So we pretty much pepper our day with those.
And some of the social isolation is so strict that she didn't actually know that 4 people had died on this ship until today.
The Zandam has now been joined by another vessel. How is this transfer of passengers going to work?
Well, the owner of this ship, Holland America, has this other vessel near it. It's called the Rotterdam, and what they're planning to do is to transfer the healthy people to this new ship, the Rotterdam. This is, of course, a way of trying to minimise the spread of this disease. That's very important, but also it's important because Panama has said that no ship can travel through its canal if they have any confirmed cases of COVID-19 on there. So separating the passengers means that the healthy people can go on to the destination of Florida, but there needs to be negotiations about what happens to people who are still on there. We don't know how long they'll be there. If countries refuse to let them come in, there could be some time.
This is far from the first time that we're talking about cruise ships and coronavirus. Time and time again, they're proving a real headache.
Yeah, and that's probably why Panama has taken such a strict stance on this. We know the virus has spread very quickly on ships. We've seen this in the Diamond Princess off the coast of Japan. That was quarantined and hundreds of people on there tested positive. And since then, they've travelled around the world and spread this. So it's a challenge for port authorities, it's a challenge for governments, but also for the cruise liner industry. They have been hit hard in recent weeks.
The BBC's Henry Bell. Now, Aaron has some other stories from our newsroom.
The veteran US civil rights leader Joseph Lowery has died aged 98. He was a former dear friend of Martin Luther King Jr. and a founding member of the Christian Leadership Conference, where he worked alongside Dr. King. Reverend Lowery spoke at the funeral of Dr. King's wife Coretta and at President Barack Obama's inauguration in 2009. Months later, Mr. Obama awarded him the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the nation's highest civilian honour. The Australian accommodation giant Quest has offered all of its 140 hotels across the nation to people undergoing mandatory 2-week isolation, turning one of its buildings into a makeshift health facility for people suffering with COVID-19. 11,000 apartments are to be made available. And finally, a medical fetish site here in the UK says it has donated its entire stock of disposable scrubs to a hospital that was desperate for supplies. The site, MedFet UK, tweeted it had only been able to offer a few sets of scrubs, but that it was scandalous that a tiny company set up to serve a small section of the kink community had ended up being sought out as a last resort supplier to the National Health Service.
All across the world, medical staff and scientists are battling to save lives and find a coronavirus vaccine. And many people are expressing their thanks to these crucial workers. Charlotte Gallagher has this report.
Oh, Taylor, look, right here. Oh, dear.
Paramedic Taylor Porter was leaving for work when her neighbours came out of their houses to applaud her. A video shared by her mother shows Taylor in tears over the gesture. People on the street in the south of England also left a box of chocolates and a cake on the roof of her car. In the US state of New Jersey, an elderly man stood outside a hospital with a cardboard sign pressed to the window saying, "Thank you for saving my wife's life. I love you all." A nurse who posted the photo on Facebook said, "This is why we do it. Times are tough, but we make a difference." In Spain, Italy, China, and countless other countries, there have been mass applause events for health workers. In the Turkish city of Istanbul, people have been leaning out of their windows at 9 o'clock every night to clap and bang pots and pans to show their appreciation. While across Pakistan, people have been waving white flags to honour the medical staff who are sometimes putting their own lives at risk to help us.
Charlotte Gallagher reporting. A reminder of our main news. Spain has recorded its highest number of deaths from the virus in a single day. And here in the UK, officials say the number of people who have died from the virus has risen by 260 in the last 24 hours to a total of more than 1,000. That's it from us here on the newsroom.
This is the BBC World Service, where the incredible story of the doomed Apollo 13 moon mission continues.
The flight of the Apollo 13 to the moon is in serious jeopardy this morning and is not going to make a moon landing. And this is indeed the gravest emergency probably yet in the American space program.
Apollo 13 is approaching the 4th day of its ill-fated flight. 9 hours ago, an explosion crippled their command module. They have battled against failing systems and a dying spacecraft ever since. Their life support and power are running out.
You know, I could tell as soon as I walked in the room that it was serious. The looks on their faces were enough.
It's now all about creating what opportunities they can from moment to moment.
Apollo 13 with Kevin Fong. Wednesday at 10:30 and 21:30 GMT.
This is the BBC World Service. I'm Becky Milligan. He started off as a footballer.
To be honest, he had no talents.
But he was a better manager. Liverpool Football Club's Jurgen Klopp is one of the most admired managers in the world.
Jurgen became the prince to kiss us away.
We profile the man who's brought glory to every club he's managed. That's After the News with me, Becky Milligan.
BBC News with Aaron Safir. Spain has recorded 832 coronavirus deaths in the past 24 hours, its largest daily number of fatalities yet. That brings the total to nearly 5,700, second only to Italy worldwide. The worst affected region is La Rioja, the wine-producing area. The origin of the pandemic, the Chinese city of Wuhan, has been partially opened up for the first time since it was cut off from the rest of China 2 months ago. Thousands of people wearing masks and protective gear disembarked from packed trains. The head of the world's biggest manufacturer of ventilators in Germany has said demand is 10 times higher than his firm's capacity to produce them. Stefan Draeger said his company had already doubled production, but orders from the US alone amounted to a year's worth of total worldwide production. Another cabinet minister in Britain has developed symptoms of the coronavirus. The Scottish Secretary Alistair Jack is isolating himself. Both the Prime Minister Boris Johnson and the Health Secretary Matt Hancock have tested positive for the virus. The number of people dying of COVID-19 in the UK has now crossed more than 1,000, with 260 deaths in the past 24 hours. India's most populous state, Uttar Pradesh, is laying on 1,000 special buses to help migrant workers stranded by the government's coronavirus lockdown. Millions across India have been left jobless and without money by the shutdown. Iran says another 139 people have died of COVID-19 since yesterday. The official number of such deaths is now more than 2,500, but the true figure is believed to be much higher. The South African government has lamented the downgrading of its credit status to junk by another of the major ratings agencies. It said the decision by Moody's couldn't have come at a worse time as the country deals with Africa's biggest coronavirus outbreak. BBC News.
You're listening to the BBC World Service. I'm Becky Milligan. He started off as a footballer.
To be honest, he had no talents.
No talent?
No, he wasn't very skillful. He wasn't a great dribbler. He was very fast.
Right, so he ran fast.
Very fast. Very
with
fast.
With the ball or not with the ball?
Better without the ball.
Luckily, he moved off the pitch.
The streets of Liverpool adorned in a magical red and white sea.
This week, our subject is Jurgen Klopp, the manager of Liverpool Football Club, whose lead at the top of the table is the biggest in English Premier League history. Liverpool fans, though, were disappointed when it was announced that the league suspended due to the coronavirus, but Jurgen Klopp had a message for them. He said, "Today, football and football matches really aren't important at all. Please look after yourselves and look out for each other. You'll never walk alone." He may be right, but we're still going to spend the rest of the programme talking about him anyway. Klopp's been hailed a football revolutionary, and the fans have loved him for years.
Well, it's unbelievable. Absolutely delighted for Klopp. He's deserved it all along.
It has been absolutely phenomenal, and we have had the best night ever. This will go down in history.
Born in 1967, Jurgen Klopp grew up in the Schwarzwald, or the Black Forest in southwest Germany. He has two older sisters. His mum stayed at home, and his dad was a travelling salesman. Raphael Honigstein wrote a book about Klopp.
The Black Forest is one of the most beautiful areas in Germany, but people living there are said to be a little bit different. They have a very strong work ethic, they're very particular. There's a bit of a cliche about neighbours checking whether you've done your dustbins properly and make sure there's no dust outside your door and whether you parked your car in a straight line.
Ex-footballer Guido Schaefer met Klopp when they were at Mainz together.
They are all believers in God. A little bit boring, a little bit slow.
That's really mean.
We'd go to school. School was only 5-6 meters away from home. You'd come home, you'd then have the whole afternoon to go and play football or play tennis or to go skiing in winter. There was a skiing resort not far away. So you could swim there. There was all this stuff to do, and I think he kind of spent this sort of classic German post-war, very happy childhood that centered around friends and just doing stuff outdoors.
His father had once dreamt of being a professional footballer, but didn't make it. He had the same dream for his son and worked him hard.
His dad, I think, had a hard time showing his love to his son in a way that we would perhaps in modern times understand it, you know, with hugs, with kisses, with being encouraging. He was the opposite. He would really drive him forward by almost subjecting him to this brutal sporting regime. He made him play tennis when he was really young. He made him play football. He made him ski. That he was just demanding his son would be perfect and would even sort of beat him 6-0, 6-0 in tennis, hoping for him to eventually improve and hit the ball back.
He described himself as a little bit of a little prince in one interview I heard.
Being the third born after two sisters, and two sisters who incidentally had been subjected to the same brutal training regime by his dad, who wanted even to turn them into footballers, we then felt a huge relief when Klopp came along, a real boy, as it were, who could then become a footballer and sort of live the dream of the dad who himself wanted to be a professional footballer and didn't quite have what it takes.
But Jürgen is, according to those in the know, more like his mother.
His mum was different. She was wanting everyone to be happy. She made sure that people enjoyed themselves. He was indulged quite a bit as the youngest of the three siblings.
They took care of me. So I only knew where the kitchen is in the house because of the smell. I was never there. I completely had no clue about all these housework things. And I was like, they treat me like the prince. That's the truth. You could turn in a proper, weird person. But I've felt the love. And that's probably the most important thing.
After school, he started playing football and studied sports science.
I'm Dietmar Schmidtgeiger, and I was head and chair at the University of Frankfurt, and I was a specialist for training science and exercise physiology.
So, was Jürgen Klopp a standout pupil?
No, he was good. He was not brilliant, but he was good.
Okay, but surely the best footballer of the year?
No, definitively not.
Oh. But he had other talents. In his final exams, he sat face to face with his professors who fired off difficult questions at him. Other students would be shaking with nerves, but not Klopp.
I asked him something, and the answers were really very good. So I said, okay, I'll ask him some more difficult things. So I asked him. He was looking at me, he was laughing, and then he told me, hey, Professor, can you ask me questions that's easy for me to give you an answer? He was the only one I can remember. Jürgen Klopp, his personality was, I know from myself that I will be successful. He was someone who was so much confidence to his own decision that he said, in Germany we call it, it's not a decision from the brain, it's a decision from the stomach. And he was always a person who said, and I will make my way.
This is me, Guido.
Yes.
This is Jürgen Klopp.
No!
Yes?
I didn't recognise him. He pursued his dream and began his football career at Mainz 05, where he met his old buddy Guido Schäfer.
This is on the training pitch in Mainz.
He looks quite relaxed, doesn't he?
He is relaxed. He's tall and relaxed. Yes.
Oh
Yes.
my God, that's just so great. I love that. I love that picture. What was he like?
He came to Mainz in 1990. Then we played together 6 years. I think he was 20 years old when he arrived in Mainz, and he was just married. He had children, and he had the lifestyle as a professional player. Professional players have many girls and no children in young years, and they go out in the night. Jürgen was the opposite of the lifestyle of the professional player. After the training program, he go to his car and drive to his family.
What would you do then?
Yes, I go and
You go and party.
A party, yes.
Get drunk.
And he loved my stories. He loves my stories from my nightlife, and I said to Jürgen, "No, Jürgen, you're too young to be married. I think you have to change these circumstances. You have divorced." And 1 year later, it was finished. The relationship was finished.
On the pitch, Guido says Klopp was good at headers and he could run like the wind. But that was about it.
I asked him, what would the manager say to the player Jürgen Klopp? And he answered, please choose another sport, another type of sport, not football. You're not...
Did he laugh?
Yes. And also I speak with him and I say, Jürgen, you eat too much sausages, bratwurst with pommes frites. He love it. Yes, and I say, Jürgen, to be in your high performance, you have to eat salad and...
Was he a bit...
No.
Okay.
But he has a nice figure and not many muscles. When we are under the shower, I had a nice body with muscles.
Yes.
And he has nothing. I said, Jürgen, where are your muscles?
What did he say to you?
I don't know. He laughs.
He just laughs.
I have not a nice body, he told me. He said, yes, Jürgen, I see it. It's not so nice.
A bit harsh. Klopp was popular with the other players, but...
When the match will start, the beast woke up in this handsome, in this intelligent, lovely boy. And he was like a beast, and he raised his voice against the referees, against opponents, and against the teammates. And therefore it was also hard to play with him. But he was a real leader.
So it was a bit like a Jekyll and Hyde. He would sort of change before your eyes.
Yes, before my eyes, yes. During the match he was crazy, and after the match he was nice, handsome boy.
To put it in context, playing for Mainz was not a money spinner. The players did not earn big bucks. They were a ragtag kind of a team, says Raphael Honigstein, and Klopp had a family to support.
The immediate danger of not having an income loomed very large. So for him, this was not just a sporting dilemma. This was a real material, existential threat.
So when he was offered a chance to manage the team rather than play, he grabbed it, much to everyone's surprise.
And when he was unveiled, which sounds very dramatic, but was really just him sitting at a desk with 3 or 4 journalists who turned up, some of them started laughing because they thought that this was all some giant prank on them, that Jürgen Klopp, this defender from Mainz, was suddenly now the new manager.
Yes, we laughed, yes. From one day to another day, it was a player to a manager. And he won the first game, and the second game a draw, and the third game a victory, and then the coach, Jürgen Klopp, was born.
His managerial style was something else. He was a showman, and he drew a crowd.
A lot of fans initially turned up just to see him do his stuff on the sideline. It was so entertaining. You know, you had this former player just going crazy, jumping up and down on the touchline. It's impossible to quantify and it's intangible, but I think it definitely has a positive effect.
So when he was that sort of novice manager, would it be a lot of screaming and swearing and running on and off the pitch?
Absolutely. I think he was a nightmare for referees. He would often get really close and show his teeth in a way that was not very attractive.
What do you mean by baring teeth? What did that look like? Was it like a sort of bear?
A bear? No, it was more like, you know, when a dog shows his teeth, it's always a sign of aggression, and he would just kind of come up and have this really frightening look, and people sometimes felt that, you know, he might bite me.
He's still the same. He still bares his teeth and does crazy jumps and scissor leaps. He runs so fast and falls over, only to get up again and keep going. The theatrics have got results.
He brought Mainz in the Bundesliga.
Wir sind in der ersten Liga!
Which is a big deal, is it?
Yes, it was the greatest deal for Mainz 05 ever.
Mainz were promoted to the top division.
We cried all.
Did you?
Yes, we cried. We celebrated, we drank, and we cried, and it was the best day in the history for Mainz 05, and it was because of Jürgen Klopp. He made it. He's a hard-working genius. I think this is the right expression for this man.
Do you remember, what was he like on that day when you achieved that?
First of all, he's crying a little bit, then he's drinking a lot.
Oh, really?
A lot, yes. It was the biggest party in Mainz, also in the history, from Saturday to Thursday. It was one night.
Really? You just carried on drinking?
Yes, no, we never slept.
What did you get up to?
We go out in the city and we celebrate with the fans. And since this day, the whole country loves Mainz 05 and also Jürgen Klopp.
In 2008, after 17 years with Mainz, he moved to Borussia Dortmund. Heiko Wasser is a friend and Dortmund fan.
I would call him Menschenfänger. I know you don't have this word, so he catches people. He catches people by his attitude, by his positive energy, by his charm, because he is very open-minded and very friendly, and he's extremely positive. And I remember everywhere, whenever I met him, his laughter.
You had a fancy dress party, didn't you? And you invited him to come along. Tell me about that.
First of all, you have to understand we are listening to funny music in Germany, which we call Schlager. And that's kind of German lyrics and German party music.
Is it quite old-fashioned music in a way? I mean, what I'm
But
really...
it's nothing for old people. Don't get that wrong. It's nothing old-fashioned, grumpy style.
It's not grumpy style.
No, for sure not. And so everybody at this party was dressed in 70 years style, because it's all about 70 years music and this funny music. He had his fancy dress, he was wearing a suit, a very colorful suit, and nobody knew that he was there. And he was having a lot of fun because nobody asked him for autographs, nobody wanted to take selfies, but he really enjoyed dancing like nuts. His dance style is pretty close to a celebration of a goal, so he needs a little bit of space on the dance floor. So if you're afraid of getting into contact, you should probably stay away a little bit. He's quite energetic, I would say.
Really, lots of arms and legs
Yeah.
everywhere and leaping.
That's him typically. See, he's not, when he's talking, he's not standing still like a priest. He's always using his hands and his arms, and there is gesture and there is mimic. And when he's on a dance floor, it's even worse or even better.
This larger-than-life character took the team by storm and also the whole city of Dortmund.
It was a kind of sleeping beauty, and Jürgen became the prince to kiss us awake. So all of a sudden there was somebody in our football stadium fighting and shouting and screaming and having discussions with referees, and he brought everybody back to life. And the same thing that had happened to his players happened to the whole city. We did believe in Jürgen, we did trust in Jürgen, and we did trust in his football.
And within a few years, they went from the bottom of the league to winning it.
When he left here, everybody was sad. There was a lot of tears on that afternoon. And then when I heard he was joining Liverpool, I was 100% sure that they would love him.
In 2015, he and his family made the move, and he made a huge impression from the very first press conference.
So I'm a totally normal guy. I'm the normal one, maybe, if you want this.
And showed from the get-go how he would handle the media and those awkward questions. The former Liverpool legend, Mark Lawrenson.
When Klopp first came to the club, the very first day, did this massive press conference, and one of the very last questions was from some guy just kind of sat towards the back, who obviously had been waiting to ask this question, because he kind of stood up and said to Jürgen Klopp, "Is that right, you've had a hair transplant?" And Jürgen Klopp kind of stared at him, and the fellow must have thought, "Oh my goodness, what's he going to say?" And he actually turned around and he said, "Yeah." He said, "My wife likes it, I like it, do you like it?" And of course the guy had nowhere else to go but said, "Yeah, it's fine." And you know what? That was the last question he ever had asked of him about his hair, so he just dealt with it straight away. My immediate impression was this man has a definite aura about him. But yeah, there was just something about him when you meet him, you go, wow.
Because that might have something to do with his teeth, mightn't it?
Well, he has these absolutely perfect teeth, and even when he's talking to you, you just end up looking at his teeth and being mesmerised.
Are they bright?
Bright. Put it this way, I bet when he gets up in the middle of the night and goes for a wee, he doesn't have to turn the light on.
And on the pitch, expectations were high. Mike Hughes, BBC Radio Merseyside's football commentator, was at the first game.
We'd heard all about Jurgen Klopp and this huge intensity to the play that Borussia Dortmund had that he would instill in his Liverpool team. And the phrase counter-pressing, the German phrase for it was gegenpressing. And the Liverpool players, they ran, every one of them, I think, without exception, bettered their running stats on that day than what they'd been doing previously. And one of the first substitutions was Adam Lallana. And when he came off the pitch, he almost fell off it. He was that, completely and utterly drained of energy. The Liverpool players work harder than any other football team I've ever seen. And that's because of the demands and the requirements of Jurgen Klopp.
Mark Lawrenson again.
The thing with Jurgen Klopp and the way all his teams have played, it's very much kind of, they play football in the opposition's face and they put them under immense pressure. They make them hurry all the way around the pitch and they play at such a fantastic speed that it's very, very difficult to play against. And then once you have a team that plays at such a fantastic pace and speed, you've got yourself a winning team, and ultimately you got yourself a winning mentality. And whenever a team plays Liverpool since Jurgen Klopp's been there, even if they beat Liverpool, they know it's a very, very difficult game. And that's why he's already won the trophies that he's won for Liverpool.
Yes, it's interesting. So it's absolutely fast, get possession of the ball and just kind of go for it.
Absolutely. I couldn't have described it better myself.
And what about in the dressing room with the players?
He keeps them guessing. So sometimes, say they're playing in the game and maybe coming at half-time and they're not playing very well, he doesn't even say anything. And on other occasions, when they think they're doing really well at half-time, he comes in and goes mad.
That's quite interesting, that sometimes he can be silent, because that's quite scary in a way, that's the silence.
I just think with Klopp, it's this whole thing where he's making them think all the time. He just keeps them all on the toes.
And from the players who you've spoken to, is he a kind of manager they like playing for?
Oh, honestly, they absolutely love him.
He talks about the players as my boys. It's more like a family, he says. Even his wife is involved and likes to treat the Liverpool players' wives and girlfriends, known as wags. Here's Heiko Wasser.
Ulla, his wife, always was with him and always was taking care of the players' wives. She took all the players' wives into a plane and they flew to Oktoberfest in Munich.
No, did they? A special wags little trip off?
Yeah, I guess so.
Just the wives?
Just the wives, yeah.
Oh, God, I wish I knew her. That sounds great.
She is 100% perfect for Jürgen because she also loves going out, she loves talking to people, she loves going to concerts, she loves having fun.
The players and ex-players have his number. He even bothers to keep in touch with his old mate Guido. So he sent you some videos, like recently, has he sent you anything? Can you show me?
Yes.
Would you mind?
Yes.
Sorry.
No
sort of
problem,
leaning
no
over,
problem.
nosily looking at all your messages.
No problem. This means when Guido Schäfer tells his stories, I laughed, but I could not live this professional life like Schäfer because I have a family.
He's a good-looking guy, isn't he?
I was nicer than him in former times. Yes, he is nice, he is attractive. All girls love him.
Hi Dave, Jürgen Klopp here from Liverpool in a moment, like an hour before we leave to Madrid.
Last year, one Liverpool fan had just emigrated to New Zealand and saved up thousands of pounds to go to the Champions League final in Spain. He then had some terrible news. Mike Hughes picks up the story.
It turned out he had an incurable illness. And, his passing was going to happen in double quick time. They were talking weeks rather than months. Jurgen Klopp got in touch with this couple.
But I heard you are an unbelievable fighter, and the only thing what I can tell you is we think of you. You are really with us.
You know, hopefully me and the boys are going to do you really proud, and fingers crossed. You know, can't guarantee, but we'll bring the Champions League back from Madrid.
You're making me cry now. My goodness.
And then he said, hopefully, you know, your condition, you know, things will not work out too difficult for you, and we are thinking of you, the players and everybody. And he said, I am a Christian, so I will see you again.
Oh, Mike, that's really moving, isn't it?
In a lot of ways, and this might sound strange, it also not only sums up Jurgen Klopp, the man, but it's Jurgen Klopp, the football manager as well, because with this type of personality and the belief that he has about that being right, well, we don't know that that's right, but he believes that he will see him again. So if he believes that, can you imagine the team talks?
He's a great believer in God. He believes in God, yes. He's a little bit before the game started in the cabin.
Right.
They make a towel on his head, and then he sat and say something. I don't know what he...
But it was important to him.
Yes, for him, yes.
And he'd do that before every match.
Yes.
Raphael Honigstein.
Yeah, religion is a big factor for Klopp. He doesn't often talk about it, but he has done things for the anniversary of Luther's birth. He is quite a big believer.
Why doesn't he want to talk about it?
It's not that he doesn't want to talk about it. I think he just doesn't want to make it the most important part of the conversation. I think he doesn't want to be known as Klopp, the Protestant, or Klopp, the big Christian. I think he feels almost wrong to make that part of the public conversation. For him, it's a fairly private affair, but it does matter in as much as I think as it informs his way of dealing and relating with people and life in general.
Those who know him say that he has a lust to win, will fight for success. He said that he has to change the doubters to believers.
He has been able to create that kind of movement mentality. This was bigger than the team. This was the whole city. They're all sort of buying into this plan, into this idea, into this energy that Klopp has brought. And it's impossible to quantify, and it's intangible, but I think it definitely has a positive effect to have that unity.
Three clubs, huge success. The question is, where will he go next?
There are not many possibilities for him to after Liverpool. Liverpool is the sexiest club, the sexiest fans. I think he will come back to Mainz, and then he can be the coach from our national team. And
really, is that what you predict for him?
Yes, this is my plan for him.
Yes.
And I will work as his assistant.
Right. And have you ever mentioned that to him?
Yes.
What does he say?
He loved. Germany loves him. It would be great, yes.
Yes. I'm Becky Milligan, and the producer was Phoebe Key.
BBC World Book Club is holding a year-long celebration of international women's writing. Here is Harriet Gilbert to tell you about the next female author.
I'll be joined by the acclaimed Pakistani writer Fatima Bhutto to discuss her gripping novel, The Shadow of the Crescent Moon. On a day seemingly like any other, three brothers meet before going their separate ways. As the events of this single morning unfold, one woman is at the centre of it all.
World Book Club from the 4th of April.
Hello, I'm Lee James. I'll be here with Sports World next on the BBC World Service. With the 2020 Olympic and Paralympic Games now postponed until next year because of the coronavirus pandemic, what impact will that have on the athletes and the host city of Tokyo? Stay with us.
On air, online and on mobile, this is the BBC World Service, the world's radio station.
This is Sports World on the BBC World Service.
Hello, I'm Lee James. There was supposed to be a celebration of sporting excellence in human endeavour this summer.
The International Olympic Committee has the honor of announcing that the games of the 32nd Olympiad in 2020 are awarded to the city of Tokyo.
But due to the deteriorating situation around the world because of the COVID-19 pandemic, the International Olympic Committee eventually bowed to the inevitable.
Given the latest worldwide dramatic developments in the spreading of the virus, we did not see the opportunity anymore to organize Olympic Games.
The Olympics had never been postponed before. We'll look at the challenges of reorganising the world's biggest sporting event on Sports World in 5 minutes.
Hello, I'm Aaron Saffir with the BBC News. Spain has recorded its largest daily number of coronavirus deaths yet, 832 in the past 24 hours. That brings the total to nearly 5,700, second only to Italy worldwide. The worst affected region is La Rioja, the wine-producing area in the north. The Health Ministry's Emergencies Coordinator, Fernando Simón, said it was possible that the outbreak was close to its peak in some areas of Spain.
La evolución temporal de estos incrementos en fallecidos.
The evolution over time of these increases in deaths remains more or less as we've observed in recent days, with rises and falls. Clearly, this suggests, along with other indications like new cases, that the number of people infected is stabilising. And it could indicate that in some parts of the country, little by little, we're reaching the peak, although at the national level, we're not at that stage yet.
The city where the coronavirus pandemic began, Wuhan in China, has partially reopened after more than 2 months of isolation. People are being allowed to enter but not leave. Will Leonardo reports.
Wuhan has been locked off from the rest of the world since strict quarantine measures came into place in January. Then, images of the security forces sealing off the central railway station marked the start of the isolation of over 11 million people. No one knew how long it would take for the virus ravaging the city to be contained. Today, the station came back to life as those stranded outside the city made their way home on sold-out trains. Passengers expressed their happiness at seeing their families for the first time in weeks. One said she'd faced discrimination elsewhere in China because of where she was from. Over 3,000 people died of COVID-19 in Hubei province, but China has now turned the tide with only 54 new cases reported on Friday.
Will Leonardo. The head of the world's biggest manufacturer of ventilators in Germany has said demand is 10 times higher than his firm's capacity to produce them. Here's Damien McGuinness.
Governments from all over the globe are ordering ventilators from us, says Stefan Dreger. He has doubled production and hopes to double again this year. But demand is 10 times what his firm can produce. The US alone has ordered 100,000 ventilators, which is the total number manufactured every year globally. And the German government has placed an order for 10,000 additional machines for German hospitals. But components come from all over the world, and Mr. Dreger warns that export bans could limit supplies and hamper production.
Damien McGuinness. The number of people in Britain dying with the coronavirus has risen above 1,000. Latest government figures show more than a quarter of the deaths happened in the 24 hours to Friday evening. Around 17,000 people have now tested positive for the virus in the UK. Among them is another cabinet minister, the Scottish Secretary Alistair Jack. World news from the BBC. A German Air Force plane has flown 6 Italian coronavirus patients to Germany for treatment. They were evacuated from Bergamo to Cologne. Earlier, a German military helicopter took 2 French patients from the eastern city of Metz to a hospital across the border in Germany. The Defence Minister, Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer, said Germany would stand by its friends in times of greatest need. The South African government has lamented the downgrading of its credit status to junk by another of the major ratings agencies. The Treasury said the decision by Moody's couldn't have come at a worse time as the country tried to deal with Africa's biggest coronavirus outbreak. Vamani Makize is in Johannesburg.
Moody's is the last of the three big ratings agencies to downgrade South Africa to sub-investment grade. It means the country will be kicked out of a key global index of government bonds and likely to suffer a big capital outflow. For ordinary South Africans, the downgrade will exacerbate an already perilous economic situation by driving up interest rates along with the cost of essentials such as food, electricity and fuel. In response to Moody's decision, the Finance Minister, Dito Mboweni, urged South Africans to comply with the 21-day shutdown regulations so they can work hard to turn the economy around once the lockdown is lifted.
India's most populous state, Uttar Pradesh, is laying on 1,000 special buses to help migrant workers stranded by the government's coronavirus lockdown. Millions across India have been left jobless and without money by the shutdown, which is sparking an exodus from major cities. Households and landmarks across the globe are expected to switch off their lights for an hour this evening from 8:30 p.m. local time to mark Earth Hour, described as the world's largest grassroots movement for the environment. Landmarks expected to take part include the Eiffel Tower and New York's Empire State Building. BBC News.
On radio, online and on mobile. This is Sports World on the BBC World Service.
Welcome to Sports World. Hello, I'm Lee James, and even without any major sport or indeed any live sport of any kind to bring you, it's still very good to be here at this strange, and I'm sure for many of you listening, a very worrying time as a result of the coronavirus pandemic. We'll continue to keep you regularly informed of the latest developments on the COVID-19 emergency here on the BBC World Service. Our next scheduled news bulletin is at 15:30 GMT. Now, usually on Sports World, we bring you the major events. I've been privileged to broadcast from Rio's Copacabana Beach during the World Cup, Wimbledon, Centre Court, Moscow, Paris, Madrid, Australia's Gold Coast, all recent destinations. The sights, the sounds, all captivating. It's not quite the same today. We're following the strict measures brought to you by the British government, so I'm staying at home. I'm literally broadcasting from a cupboard under the stairs at my house. Our studio manager, though, Liam, and producer Tom, they're back in the studio at a safe distance apart to help you bring this programme to you today, wherever you're listening around the world. And it is only when something disappears you realise how much you miss it. When a familiar routine is disrupted and changed, you remember how much you rely upon it. No one should think the cancellation or postponement of elite sport really matters when compared to the crisis happening around the world right now. But the decision taken by the International Olympic Committee and the Tokyo organisers to postpone the 2020 Olympic and Paralympic Games on Tuesday was momentous. In some of the darkest times in recent human history, global wars have forced the Olympics to be cancelled, but delaying the greatest sporting show on earth has never happened before in 124 years, until now.
It was very hard to take because first of all, we had to consider the dreams of the Olympic athletes, which we wanted to make coming true. On the other hand, we were feeling with the many people around this globe whose life is affected in a very difficult way, and where you could hardly then have Olympic Games in this atmosphere, and then given the latest worldwide dramatic developments in the spreading of the virus, we did not see the opportunity anymore to organize Olympic Games which safeguard the health of every participant.
As the president of the International Olympic Committee, Thomas Bach, on Tuesday, March the 23rd, the Tokyo 2020 countdown clock showed there were just 122 days to go before the Olympics opening ceremony. By Wednesday morning, the clock outside Tokyo Station simply displayed the current date and time. We're going to spend the next hour or so trying to work out what this means for global sport, how the athletes will cope, and what sort of games can we expect next year. Who better to try and help answer some of those questions than our experts who have covered between them 23 Olympic Games. Steve Wilson is a former long-time Olympic correspondent for the Associated Press and past president of the Olympic Journalists Association, and joins us, along with the BBC Sports News correspondent Alex Capstick. Hello to you both.
Hi, Lee.
Hi, Lee.
Thank you so much for being with us today. And of course, we're going to get a feel for what the athletes are going through. We have multiple Olympic medalists, world champions on the track, the bike, individual achievers, team sports, some experience hoping for one more shot at glory, and some hoping to make their Olympic debuts. That's all coming up. Let's get straight to this, though, Alex. Tuesday's decision was an extraordinary turnaround. It was an Olympics that was expected to be held without major issues by a country known for public safety and economic stability.
Yeah, the preparations, Lee, have gone really well, and as you say, people are looking forward to what can be described as a safe games from Tokyo. Everything was ready, the venues, accommodation. There were no worries as there have been in other Olympics and the build-up to other Olympics, such as Rio, Athens. One remembers hardly anything was ready before those games. Of course, they went ahead and they were successful. But yeah, it was smooth going ahead of Tokyo. But then, of course, the coronavirus outbreak. The IOC, though, and the Japanese organisers were insisting it would go ahead. It would start on July the 24th. I was in Lausanne at the IOC headquarters a few weeks ago when Thomas Bach told us all that it was full steam ahead and they would be starting on July the 24th in Tokyo, the opening ceremony. There was no plan B. There were no contingency plans, which was in contrast to what seemed to be going on in the sporting world at that time. Football was being stopped. The Euro 2020 was postponed by UEFA, European football's governing body, and it seemed that whilst sport was being cancelled, postponed across the world, the IOC was ploughing ahead with the Olympics. And then things changed quite quickly in the end. There was that meeting on Sunday with the IOC's executive board when they said that they would come to a decision in around 4 weeks. I think there was a bit of friction between the IOC and the Japanese organisers. Tokyo wanted to go ahead with the Games in July because the situation in Japan wasn't as bad as elsewhere with the virus, with the outbreak. And Thomas Bach seemed to be going along with that. But then it came to a stage, I think, when he thought, look, this can't go ahead. It is so bad. The advice we're getting from the World Health Organization, also criticism from athletes and sports organizations, that they had to reach a decision quickly on postponement. And then I think had to do a bit of work with Tokyo, the local organisers, to persuade them that postponement was the best idea, and that's what we got eventually on Tuesday. I think it was expected by then, although it's a momentous decision. I think the whole sporting world realised that that was coming, and it probably was the right decision.
Steve, what took them so long to postpone the Games? Did they miscalculate public feeling at the time of the heightened fears over the coronavirus? Because the IOC was still lighting the Olympic flame near the Temple of Hera, weren't they? The sacred site of an ancient Olympia, when countries around the world were going into lockdown.
That's right. I think really the tipping point started to come quite quickly last week when athletes started speaking out loudly in favor of postponement. You had the U.S. Federations for athletics and swimming coming out for postponement. Those are hugely influential groups. Then you had NOCs from Australia and Canada and other countries saying they would like to postpone or they would not come to the games if they were held this year. So the pressure grew and grew from the stakeholders, the athletes groups. And then, in addition, the virus itself was more widespread. And the WHO, which the IOC was collaborating with, was giving more and more alarming signals of the acceleration of the virus around the world. And the IOC woke up to news that the virus outbreak was starting in Africa. It was getting worse in the United States. And I think the IOC realized there was no other choice now than to go for a postponement. The first important decision was not to cancel. We can go through that later. They decided there would not be cancellation of the games, but postponement was the most, let's say, the least bad solution, I think, to the problem. And then, as Alex mentioned, the IOC Executive Board had an emergency session last Sunday by telephone. And then after that meeting, they publicly said for the first time that postponement was a possibility. And however, they gave a 4-month window to make a final decision. And that was really to get the Japanese on board. I think the IOC at that point, once they announced that postponement was possible, had made the decision in their mind quite clear that there was no going back. But the problem was to get to Japan to agree and to go along and to be able to make the decision together. The IOC was not going to make a unilateral decision in this case. This is not the way they were going to go. And most important is the fact that for Japan, these games have meant so much for them. They were awarded to them 7 years ago. They prepared so hard, and as the IOC has kept repeating, these games are probably the best organized at this point in the cycle than any other games that have come before. So, politically, for Japan and for Prime Minister Abe in particular, this was crucial to be able to find a way to postpone the games while saving face. The IOC was not going to embarrass Japan by pulling the games, by postponing the games without Japan's approval. So Thomas Bach was able to speak with Abe, and Abe, I think, knew at this point that there was no other solution, and it was Abe who came out and asked for the postponement officially for the IOC. So in the end, Bach was able to work with Japan and with Abe in particular to find this solution earlier than expected. And in other words, not in 4 weeks' time, but in 2 or 3 days' time.
Absolutely, because initially it was that 4 weeks deadline given. We'll look at where the Olympics and Paralympics now fit in to the new calendar in 2021 a little bit later. But I want to take you to Tokyo now to get a sense of the mood there after the postponement. The sports journalist Yuzua Oka joins us from the Japanese capital. Yuzua, it was going to be the focus on Tokyo this summer. What is everyone there? What are the Tokyoites feeling about this decision? Have they resigned themselves to this?
Well, yes, totally. Well, there's a Japanese phrase for that. It's like shikata ga nai. That means like it can't be helped. So considering the situation with the growing number of patients in some major cities around the world experiencing lockdowns, it would not have been possible to host the games safely this summer. But people here are also wondering about the looming uncertainty about money and schedule as well.
Yeah, financially, how difficult is it going to be to reorganise? It has already cost billions of dollars, and presumably now contracts need to be renegotiated for venues and for the athletes' villages.
Yes, you're right. So it was already set to be one of the most expensive summer games. The initial cost was estimated to be 1.35 trillion yen, which is around 10 billion pounds, and that is only a conservative estimate. And now that the games are postponed, it may cost an additional 2 billion pounds or more, and that's for re-renting the venue as well as staffing costs. And we are yet to know who will bear the cost. Would it be the Tokyo municipal government, the Japanese government, or the IOC? We don't really know.
And in terms of the people there, is there a sense of disappointment, or is it just acceptance that this just wouldn't have been the right time to have hosted a celebration like this?
Oh yeah, they're both like disappointment, and also they are accepting. And Japanese are really well at accepting the given situation. So yes, we are treating it fairly well, I think.
Now, it's not always possible, though, for everyone just to convene again in the date in 2021. We had the volunteers planned, several thousand of them going to be taking part in the games. There's a lot of pieces have to be put back together again, don't they, for the games to be a success in 2021?
Definitely. So volunteers have been preparing for it from the beginning of 2019, and they're really perplexed about the postponements. And some say that they really want to be a volunteer no matter when it happens, but some of them are not sure. For example, 20% of the city volunteers are teens, so they have to figure out the school commitment to be in the volunteers for the 2021.
And are you getting a sense there that it will be once again in the summer in 2021? We have heard talk of a cherry blossom games in the spring. What is the feeling there?
I think, well, the cherry blossom game sounds great, but considering all the extra population as well as the need for containing the virus, I don't think that it will happen any earlier than the 2021 summer. But yes, I hope there's going to be a really solid amount of preparation put on to be a perfect way for the world to come together for this after the crisis.
Well, thank you so much for joining us live from Tokyo. That's Yuzua Oka giving us that feeling and that view from the Japanese capital on these games. Alex and Steve are still with us. The right decision has been reached, but how damaging has this been? Just briefly from both of you. Alex, first of all, for the IOC, for its president, Thomas Bach.
He did get a lot of criticism, especially when he talked about that 4-week delay in coming up with a decision. A lot of the athletes came out and said that's too long, we need certainty. There were, as Steve mentioned, the Canadian Olympic Committee said they wouldn't send a team in July, and also the Australian Olympic Committee. And that was interesting because the head of the Australian Olympic Committee is a man called John Coates. He was is in charge of the Coordination Commission for the Tokyo Games. He's also a long-time ally of Thomas Bach, and it was interesting that he came out and said, look, we're not going to go if the games go ahead. So maybe a bit of pressure on Thomas Bach ahead of the decision he eventually made. I don't think it particularly weakens his position as president of the IOC. He's been in control now since he took charge in 2013. He's very powerful in the IOC. There hasn't been much open criticism of him within the IOC, and he's up for re-election. I think next year he's got another 4 years that he can take if he wants. I expect he will, and I don't suspect there will be anybody to oppose him. I might be wrong, but he is in a strong position. There has been speculation that the Olympic brand has been damaged by the delay, the time it's taken for them to reach this decision to postpone the games. But I think everyone agrees that decision was the right one when it eventually came.
Okay, I'll get you thoughts on that, Steve, in just a moment or two. But it's about the athletes, isn't it? Uncertain times for them, many dreaming of winning gold medals, standing on the top step of the podium. The Dutch Paralympic sprinter Marlou van der Ang certainly knows what that feels like. She is a 3-time Paralympic gold medalist, a reigning 100 and 200 metres T44 champion, and joins us from Amsterdam, from the Netherlands. Hello, Marlou. Thanks for joining us on Sports World.
Thank you.
I'm very good. I'm very good. I feel, given that I'm broadcasting from my home in a cupboard today because of the situation we're in, I should ask you, what's your situation like? What's your view like at the moment?
Well, I'm staying at home as well, as hopefully a lot of people are doing at the moment. So lots of training in my garden or my home.
Yes, that is what I know many are having to do at the moment around the world. We're also joined by the Czech rock climber, described as the leading climber of his generation, 5-time world champion Adam Ondra. And Adam, you're at home as well, I understand, in the Czech Republic, with the country there under lockdown. How are you feeling about the situation? This would have been an opportunity for you to compete at the Olympics, with climbing making its debut.
Yes, but I'm not that worried because the Olympics are not cancelled. I just have to be patient and wait for 1 more year. And I think it's in general it's a good decision, because if the Olympics would take place this summer, for sure it would not be fair for all of the athletes. Because, for example, I'm quite lucky to have a pretty good climbing wall right at my home, but most of the other climbers are not as lucky. So it would be pretty unfair for them.
So that's what you're doing at the moment in the lockdown situation. You're still able to get some climbing in.
Yeah, for sure the training gets compromised, as my home gym is not really that big, but I can still get quite a lot of training done.
And that's the key thing, isn't it, Marlou? It's not a cancellation, it's a postponement. I know on social media you posted different year, same goal, Tokyo 2021, and stay safe. No one wants to miss out on an Olympics or a Paralympic Games when you've been training so hard, but ultimately then, was this the right decision, the only decision that they could have come to?
Yes, I definitely think so. I was really happy that they decided that they put the priority with health, so everyone should stay healthy. And as an athlete, you want to have the right preparation for the games. It's such a big event, so to postpone it is obviously way better than to cancel it. But also, if you would have it this year, like just has been said, it wouldn't be fair, and it felt a bit like a relief when it was postponed. So now we can just have a little bit of breathing space and hopefully help others by just staying home and staying safe.
And I know it was a very anxious time for a number of athletes in different sports, unable to train properly, but until the postponement, still thinking they had to because of the games going ahead. Do you think enough was done to protect the athletes in that situation, Marlou?
Well, for us, I think the decision, the partial lockdown that we have, it was just, I think, only 1 week until the decision came, so it wasn't that long. But I was really happy that the decision was made, because, like you said, it felt a bit dangerous going outside, and just not right.
And Adam, of course, we believe they have come to the right decision. There is that breathing space, as Marlou was now saying, until the Games in 2021. But we spoke recently, looking ahead to climbing, making its Olympic debut. It must hurt a little when you have been working so hard towards a certain goal and a certain date to know that it's no longer there at the moment. The dreams aren't over, of course, but just postponed, and that can be difficult to deal with.
I was thinking about it quite a lot, like 3 weeks ago, and that kind of imagination was really painful at that time. But as it took 3 more weeks to finally hear the verdict, I kind of got used to it and got like mentally over that. And so at the moment, I'm pretty optimistic and maybe even more psyched because I'll just be waiting 1 more year, so it's going to be even more amazing, possibly.
And in terms of amazing and getting a feel for things, Marlou, you were on the first athletes to be on the Olympic stadium track, weren't you? Where
Definitely.
the Paralympics and Olympics are going to be. Tell us about that. What an honour that was.
Yes, well, I can definitely say that it will be worth the wait. It was an amazing experience to be there. It was such a privilege, and the people in Japan, they're really ready for it, and they're very excited. So that's also a reason that I'm really happy that it's not cancelled, because these people, they've put so much into it, and they're looking forward to it as much as I think the athletes do. So I can definitely say that it'll be worth the wait, and it'll be great whenever it will be.
And sport can play that role as well, Marlou, to bring people together, to overcome adversity. I know throughout your career it's been about striving for equality and inclusion for everyone. At the moment, maybe a positive, a glimmer of hope is that there is a sense that we are pulling together now, remembering to look out for others, and maybe these games, when they come along, can be a celebration of that.
Definitely, yes. I'm so impressed by how people come together now and wanted to be fair more than anything, and just want to stay healthy. And I think that when the games will be, and when this all hopefully is over, we can just celebrate coming together and performing at the highest level and making people happy, hopefully.
Absolutely, and Adam, maybe just about 500 or so days maybe to go until the Olympics now. You're revising your whole schedule, working towards that.
Yeah, definitely working on my schedule is very difficult still, because we don't really know yet what's going to happen in the next few weeks when the lockdown will be over, if there's going to be any competition this year. So it's kind of just, I keep training at home and I'm relaxed and just getting excited for hopefully that all of this crisis with the coronavirus will be over. And I'm pretty optimistic that it will be. And I think humans are usually able to overcome the crisis and come out of it even better and stronger. And I think for this situation, it's not going to be any different.
Yes, absolutely. And Marlou, I guess for you as well, that uncertainty, the European Para-Athletics Championships due to be held in June in Poland, postponed as well. It's difficult to know when many athletes will be back competing again.
Yes, that's really a bit of a crazy feeling, a bit of a surreal situation. But again, it's also a bit strange to even think about that, with so many things going on and health being the most important thing now at this time. So we don't know, but it's not that important to know. I think it's important to stick together, to stay fit, and hopefully make it as soon as we get on the track, make it a nice show.
Yes, it absolutely will be. Whenever we see that live sporting action again, we'll certainly cherish it. Marlou, Adam, thank you so much for being with us today. That is Marlou van Raan and Adam Ondra with us from the Netherlands and from the Czech Republic, two athletes hoping to compete in that rescheduled Olympic and Paralympic Games in Tokyo. We'll be talking about the athletes and how they come back in better shape, and what we've got to look forward to in a new Olympic year very soon.
You're listening to the BBC World Service, keeping you up to date and informed.
The priority of our government is the health and well-being of our people.
Right now, life is changing for all of us around the globe.
India, with its 1.3 billion population, is anxious and nervous.
Here at the BBC World Service, we're bringing you regular roundups on the spread and implications of the coronavirus.
People are being told to remain in their primary residence rather than put additional pressure on communities and services already at risk.
We have all the latest medical information, news of work towards a treatment, and reports from the affected areas.
The Hungarian government won praise at home and abroad for declaring a state of emergency very early.
The global effects on health, business, sport and travel.
We are all in this together.
Here on the BBC World Service.
Still to come on Sports World with me, Lee James. We continue to assess the impact postponing the 2020 Olympic and Paralympic Games is having on the athletes and the international sporting calendar. The Olympic movement has faced many challenges before, from terrorism to political boycotts and doping scandals, but has never taken a decision like this before in peacetime. We'll ask, when will the Games take place and how safe will they be? We're back in 2 minutes with Sports World.
Hello, I'm Aaron Saffrey with the BBC News. Spain has suffered another surge in the number of deaths from the coronavirus. It registered more than 800 in the past 24 hours, its largest daily toll since the crisis began. It brings the total to nearly 5,700, second only to Italy. The Chinese city of Wuhan, where the pandemic began last December, has partially reopened for the first time since it was cut off from the rest of China 2 months ago. Thousands of people are wearing masks and protective clothing, disembarked from the packed trains. The head of the world's biggest manufacturer of ventilators in Germany has said demand is 10 times higher than his firm's capacity to produce them. Stefan Draeger said his company had already doubled production, but he said orders from the United States alone amounted to a year's worth of total worldwide sales. The number of people in Britain dying as a result of the virus has risen above 1,000. About 17,000 people have now tested positive. Among them is another cabinet minister. India's most populous state, Uttar Pradesh, is laying on 1,000 special buses to help migrant workers stranded by the government's coronavirus lockdown. Millions across India have been left jobless and without money by the shutdown. Kenya's Deputy President William Ruto has urged police to act with civility and restraint after they were accused of using excessive force to impose a nighttime curfew. The indefinite overnight ban on movement is part of efforts to control the spread of the virus. Batons and tear gas were used against passengers hoping to board a ferry in Mombasa. The South African government has lamented the downgrading of its credit status to junk by another of the major ratings agencies. It said the decision by Moody's couldn't have come at a worse time as the country tried to deal with Africa's biggest coronavirus outbreak. And that's the latest BBC News.
On radio, online and on mobile. This is Sports World on the BBC World Service.
Hello, this is Lee James. Welcome back to Sports World. We're reflecting on the decision to postpone the 2020 Tokyo Olympic and Paralympic Games until next year. We'll look at some of the big decisions that have to be made. The IOC President Thomas Bach described it as a huge jigsaw puzzle, trying to fit the Olympics into a new year. We'll look at some of those challenges and we'll hear from some more athletes from right around the world that have been affected by this decision here on the BBC World Service. And one of those athletes who was hoping to compete in Tokyo at his home Olympic Games is Kazuma Tomoto, the Japanese equestrian rider who competed at the Rio Olympics and was clearly looking forward to being there in Japan in the summer. Kazuma joins us now live on Sports World. Hello, thank you very much for joining us.
Hello, I'm Kazu.
Kazu, thank you so much. And it was your dream, of course, to compete at your home Olympics in Tokyo. How did you feel when you heard about the postponement?
Yeah, it was such a disappointment because we were ready for the summer of this year. Yeah, it was such a disappointment. However, the best priority is our health, obviously. That's why we have no choice. And also, I should think I got plenty of time for practice for next year.
Absolutely, there is definitely time for that, and it's not the end of the dream, of course. It is just delayed a little while. What would competing at a home Olympic Games in Japan mean to you?
To me, to compete Olympics Games is my dreams. That's why that is my biggest goal, biggest target, and also I would say thank you so much for everyone who supported me all the time. So yeah, that is biggest things, big things for me.
And you switched to England to work with William Foxbit, who has won Olympic medals at 3 different games. What has he done for you and for your riding, and how much do you hope there can be glory for you now in 2021?
Yes, I best. I'm sorry. I've trained with William Foxbit now, and he gave me a great advice all the time. Sometimes technically advice, and also sometimes to my mentality. And yeah, I think the biggest advice is how to management everything, how to make an event plan, how to make a competition plan, and also how to choose which event is good practice for me, and also how long times and how many days horses should take a break. So yeah, how to management is biggest advice to me.
Absolutely, and for everyone listening around the world at the moment, when we think of athletes and competing at the games, what would it mean then for you to potentially be on the podium at the Tokyo Games when it comes around in 2021? What would it mean to you?
Yeah, still alive. Our dreams to get a team medal at Tokyo Olympics, even postponed a year. So, you know, we have to improve more and more, and also we need to be strong. That's why, yeah, it's a time to practice now.
There is time to practice, and we all need to stay strong as well, and we'll find out when you get to realise those dreams when the Games are reorganised in Tokyo. Thank you so much for joining us now, though. That's Kazumo Tomoto, the Japanese equestrian rider. We're getting reaction in all the time, as we have done over the last few days since the postponement of the Olympic and Paralympic Games. And today, the 2-time Grand Slam tennis champion, Naomi Osaka, of course, born in Japan, competes for Japan, has posted a message on social media reacting to the decision. She says, "This is the time for people from all countries, backgrounds and races to rally together to save as many lives as we can. That, to me, is the Olympic spirit." The thoughts of the 2-time Grand Slam tennis champion Naomi Osaka on the postponement of her games, the Tokyo Olympics, until 2021. We'll look at some of the challenges that the organisers now faced. We have our experts with us, 23 Olympic Games between them. Steve Wilson, former Olympic correspondent for the Associated Press, and the BBC Sports News correspondent Alex Capstick. We all remember the images of our first Olympics or Paralympics that we've experienced. You've covered so many between you. Is there one moment, is there one gold medal that you particularly remember watching or listening to? The very first one that is there in your mind, Steve, from all those games that you've covered, which one would it be?
Well, okay, going back as far as I can think, the one that stands out from the early Olympics that I covered was probably the men's volleyball final, 1988 in Seoul, because I covered the entire volleyball tournament, and it was the U.S. Defeating the Soviet Union team of the time in the final. So it was the ultimate final between the two superpowers, and the U.S. won the gold, and for me it was quite a memorable moment to as a young reporter to cover that.
And Alex, well, what's that early Olympic gold medal moment for you?
Well, my first games were Sydney in 2000, Lee, and I think I was there to cover athletics, track and field the first week. I don't think I actually saw any live sports. I was in a studio presenting programs, but the second week I was in the stadium, and the first gold medal medal I must have seen was Maurice Green winning the 100 metre, but I can't remember that. But what I do remember is Kathy Freeman winning the 400 metres, a hugely symbolic moment. She was wearing that full bodysuit, the aerodynamic green and gold bodysuits, storming around the bend on the final straight to win the gold medal for Australia, and then carrying both the Australian and Aboriginal flags around the stadium in her victory parade. It was absolutely a stunning race, and what an atmosphere inside the stadium. There are a few moments on it when the hairs on the back of your neck stand up, and that was one of those. It was just a wonderful sporting moment, an iconic moment, I think, in sport, certainly in Australian sport.
Absolutely, and you do wonder, we were all hoping to have some of those moments this summer. It will now be in 2021. So let's look at some of the challenges that Tokyo faces right now. There are many to go through. Thomas Bach, Steve, for one, has given no guarantees the Athletes' Village and other key Tokyo sites will be available for the rescheduled games. There is uncertainty around those. Some apartments have even been purchased already in the Athletes' Village. There are many logistical challenges, aren't there, to overcome now?
Absolutely. Well, we discussed a little bit earlier. The first one is that you have to set the dates first and then fit everything around it. So I think we'll have a decision on the dates of the games probably within the week, within this week.
What's your feeling on that then? Because this Cherry Blossom Games was put out there, but is that likely to happen?
I think that's still out there. I think it's less and less likely. I think the IC had discussions this week with all the international federations, and I think most of them are in favor of retaining the traditional July-August date period. Would prefer the spring games. The weather would be more ideal for sure. There's no question about that. But I think the majority of the sports federations and other stakeholders would hold out for July, August. So I would think all signs are pointing to that at this moment.
And maybe a conflict as well with European football and also NBA seasons in the US as well to consider.
Yeah, the time frames are not easy for either time frames, but the spring one is probably more complicated because, yes, as you pointed out, it would conflict with the NBA season in the U.S., and therefore the NBA players wouldn't be able to come to the Olympic Games. And especially for track and field athletics, I'm sure Seb Coe would tell you that he would really be opposed to having the event at that time of year. Athletes in track and field are not really peaking to compete in those months. They're much better later in summer months. So, there is a conflict, of course, with the IAAF World Championships and some World Athletics World Championships to be held next year. They are scheduled still to be held in Eugene, Oregon, in late July, which would conflict with the new rescheduled games. Seb Coe has made clear that he and organizers in Eugene would be willing to change the dates until 2022, which would be quite helpful. The other sport which does have its championships, major sport which has its World Championships next year during the Olympic period, would be swimming. And FINA, the governing body, has indicated it too is willing to be flexible in changing the dates, but only within 2021. They're not talking about moving to 2022, so they would have to find another period. So, those are just two of the sports. There's 33 Olympic sports, remember, involved in this. They all are going to have to adapt. They're going to have to change their schedules for next year. There's 4 venues which have to be secured again. A lot of these venues are leased by the city. Therefore, the organizers are going to have to make sure that they can use those venues again next year at the time that they want them. And as you mentioned, the Olympic Village is a key venue, of course, where 11,000 athletes will be staying. Some of the apartments that are going to be sold off after the games have already been sold. So a solution will have to be found. But it's clear that the Japanese organizers are not planning to build another Olympic Village. They're not going to put athletes in hotels. They plan to keep the same village used for next year. That's going to be the only reasonable solution, but it does require some management.
Sure. And just a final point on this, Alex, Thomas Bach himself has said there will need to be sacrifice and compromise. Is it inevitable that some aspects of the 2021 games will be scaled back, will feel a little different to what they would have done in 2020? Is it even conceivable that all 33 sports will be scheduled and will go ahead again?
I suppose anything's possible. as far as the Japanese organisers are concerned, I'm sure that they'll want to have it exactly the same as it would have been this year. Thomas Bach described it as a giant jigsaw puzzle, and every piece has to fit. It's a huge operation. It's a huge challenge for the IOC and the Japanese organisers. But as Steve was saying, I do expect it to take place in the same sort of time frame. According to the Japanese media, Yoshiro Mori, he's the head of the local organising committee, he said today that they're thinking of a time between June and September, which would suggest it's going to be roughly the same sort of period for both the Olympics and the Paralympics that would have been this year. And I would imagine that they would want it to be the same. They'd have all 33 sports, all events within those sports. Yes, there are going to have to be sacrifices. Everybody has to work together. As far as the Olympic Village is concerned, that's a huge one. But as I understand it, and Steve might correct me here, but as I understand it, the tenants aren't due to move in until 2023, so that would suggest they would have it free for next year to use the same village. I think hotel rooms is a massive issue. They block book thousands of hotel rooms years in advance, so they've got to get that sorted out. So yes, huge logistical difficulties, but I don't think they'll want to lose anything. Certainly the Japanese organisers won't want to lose anything.
Well, we'll hear about some of those other issues that may arise then as we look to reschedule the Olympic and Paralympic Games. And what about the athletes? How do they feel about the changes that are coming down the line? The two-time World Triathlon Series champion, Flora Duffy of Bermuda, has been to 3 previous Olympics and joins us on Sports World from South Africa. Hello, Flora.
Hi, thank you for having me on.
Thank you very much indeed. And we're also joined by Kristen Thomas, a member of the USA's Rugby Sevens team, who is in San Diego in the US. So, Chris, thanks so much for being with us.
Oh, thank you for having me.
And Tokyo will be your first Olympics, Chris, because unfortunately you missed out on Rio through injury. So even tougher, I imagine, to take this postponement, this delay that we have now got.
Yeah, initially, I was pretty devastated to hear the news, just because, we have been training for this for such a long time, and as a team, and then myself in particular, missing out on the last one. So I was pretty devastated, but it's just a really tough time for our world right now, and it's just we have to sort this out. We have to get through this virus, and we have to help people, because people are losing their jobs, people are losing their sources of income, and all these different things. People are getting sick, so our world is just really hurting right now. So it just kind of makes me feel like a little lesser than worrying about the Olympics in particular, when we have so many things going on in the world.
Absolutely, we have so many challenges to overcome, Flora, and experiences that we're all sharing around the world right now. You're in South Africa, as I mentioned, a country which has started a lockdown. So am I right in saying that you're not allowed out at the moment? And what have you done? Are you maintaining some sort of training? What's your situation there?
Yeah, that is correct. We started a 21-day lockdown yesterday, so I'm on day 2 here. And yeah, we're not allowed to leave the house to do any exercise or to walk the dogs. You just basically you can obviously go out to do essential things such as grocery shopping or go to the doctors. But no, you're just supposed to hang out in your house. And so for me as a triathlete that literally exercises all day, it's quite a change. But luckily I have a good setup here. I have a treadmill, and I have a turbo trainer that I can hook my bike up to. And there's this great online platform called Zwift, it's virtual riding. So I can ride my bike, and so I can pretty much train almost as normally as I would if I was allowed out of the house.
So you can simulate the outdoor runs, can't you, and things like that?
You can, yes, yeah. So that definitely helps a lot. It just kind of keeps me mentally sane.
Absolutely, well, and keeps us connected as well, doesn't it, with the outside world and what's going on. Chris, what is it like in a team sport environment? Because you're training individually then, I guess, at the moment. Have you been given your own training program to do?
Yes, we have. So we have an app on our phones that basically takes us through our lifting programs. So I'm really fortunate I have a gym in my house, so I'm able to do those. But some of my teammates, they're using bands, they're using, if they have roommates that they're allowed to interact with, they're using like each other. So we're just basically relying heavily on our roommates, our bands, the equipment that we already have in the house. And then aside from that, currently, San Diego is at a stage where we are allowed to run outside. So most of us are taking advantage of that, and we're figuring out how to do our workouts either at the local parks, those that they've kept open, or our training pitch is actually actually still open right now. We're just not allowed to train as a team.
So it's a case of still trying to connect in some way, even if it's on the WhatsApp groups or things like that then, Chris?
Oh, most definitely. Yeah, we still have meetings each week, and then we have the WhatsApp groups. We have Zoom, so we're still doing. We had virtual happy hour the other day. So yeah, we're definitely still trying to connect with each other, and we're really fortunate that we have all of technology and whatnot.
Where would we be without that? I mean, in some ways, we're trying to do the same here on Sports World today, trying to bring together as many different athletes from right around the world. So Flora, Chris, great to have you with us. We're going to look at some of the issues then surrounding the postponement of the Olympic and Paralympic Games. Alex Capstick, one of the issues that I know you've been following is the issue of drug testing and doping during the coronavirus pandemic. The head of the US Anti-Doping Agency, Travis Tiger, feared that some athletes will take advantage of the reduced testing. How concerning is that? Because you've been putting this point, haven't you, to the president of the World Anti-Doping Agency?
Yes, Lee. The restrictions put in place by governments across the world now do present a big problem for anti-doping organisations and possibly, as you suggest, opportunities for athletes who might want to take advantage of the reduced testing. Travis Tiger, he said they were only undertaking what he described as mission-critical testing. The man in charge of global anti-doping is Witold Banka. He's a former athlete. He was Minister of Sport in the Polish government until he took up the role as WADA president at the start of this year. I caught up with him on a video call the other day, and he was keen to stress that the priority is for everyone to keep safe and healthy, but he did say that testing will continue despite the difficulties.
Well, it will be a problem because when the doping controllers are following the guidelines coming from our adults, it will be violation, of course.
Okay, so it would be a violation if they refuse the test. Yeah. Okay.
I didn't mention about it that the athletes, nothing's changed in the situation. The athletes need to inform about, need to deliver all whereabouts information. So we have some temporarily suspended the testing activity, but in some places, in some countries, in some spaces, we conduct testing in accordance with procedures, and of course, and we ask adults and federations to assess the high risky sports and to try to maintain the controls in this area.
As Witold Banka, the head of the World Anti-Doping Agency, Flora Duffy, a triathlete, Chris Thomas from the US Rugby Sevens team, are with us on Sports World. It's one of the issues and one of the concerns of what goes on during the coronavirus pandemic, the delays with the testing. Have you had experiences with that? Have you been told what is going on, Flora, as regards testing during the lockdown?
Yeah, I recently was sent a document sort of saying that the protocol will pretty much still be the same, the standard testing protocol, but obviously more safety measures will be put in place in terms of keeping a safe distance, wearing protective gloves, maybe a protective mask. But they did, one of the main things they did emphasize, which I found was strange, is that they're not gonna test us regularly. Like, it'll only be sort of like high risk athletes, maybe, I think they said, or target certain areas. So for me as an athlete that, I mean, you know, you want to always fight for clean sport, that just sort of sent alarm bells to me that this is going to be a period where there's not going to be that much testing, and it definitely opens the door for people to push the limits and to try to get away with doping during this time period.
Concerns there, Chris. What's your experience like? Have you been contacted? Do you know what is going on in this period now with regards to testing?
Yes, we've also gotten an email about just continuing to update our whereabouts and that they will be doing testing. So yeah, I agree with Flora with the a few alarm bells, especially for us because we play a contact sport. So we want it to be an even playing field at all times. So hopefully, you know, I guess we just have to hope that everyone, you know, continues to compete clean in this time.
Absolutely. And another issue is regarding qualification. Chris, you qualified in Rugby Sevens, of course. Have you heard what is happening there? Do the spots get retained? What happens now? This is all uncharted territory, isn't it?
It is. I'm not completely sure, but my assumption, depending on when the games are going to be held, they'll continue to do those different repechage tournaments. So the last Olympic cycle, we didn't qualify automatically within our season, so we went to North Carolina after our season for the North American qualifier. So I assume that those will still be able to take place just earlier next year, depending on when they decide to schedule the games.
And Flora, for you with the qualification in the triathlon, I think the process was due to conclude, wasn't it, in May? So what's the situation there at the moment?
Yes, you're right. It was meant to conclude in May, but I'm not sure. The ITU, International Triathlon Union, have not set out updated guidelines of what the updated qualification procedure will be. But I do presume that the first few races I actually don't even know if they would say the first few races of 2021 would continue to be qualification races, because we don't really know if we're going to race in 2020. It's kind of hard to put down any races there.
We just don't know the situation, do we, at the moment? Steve Wilson, just bring you in just for a quick pointer on this. It is a concerning time for athletes because some would have been leaving their sports maybe after the summer, retiring. Others, boxers, maybe wanting to turn pro, and a lot of issues to be sorted out, Steve.
Yeah, for the athletes who we've heard from this during this hour, I mean, as you say, for some of them it's their last chance, their best chance, their only chance was this year. So others are going to have another chance next year. So it's a mixture of fortunes. Relief for some that they'll have extra time to prepare, and disappointment for others that they may not get another chance.
So I'm going to put you all on the Here We Go task force then. A quick final thought from you all for this hour. What happens then? Flora, Chris, what do you hope? I mean, Flora, for you, you've tasted success on Japanese soil. You've won in Yokohama, haven't you, in the triathlon? You hope those celebrations are there when we know the dates come 2021.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the goal is still the same. The timeline has just changed, and I hope to be there in 2021. And of course, my big goal is to win a medal for Bermuda, to be the first woman to win a medal. So I'll just keep continuing on and aim for 2021.
Chris, we're putting you on the Here We Go task force. What do you want to happen then for 2021?
I have similar dreams to Flora. We just want to take our strongest squad to those games and get that gold medal. So we're really hopeful for that. We're taking this extra year to help us get better, and we hope to be on that podium.
Well, we wish you the very best, and thank you so much for talking to us today, Chris Thomas and Flora Duffy. Thanks for being with us on Sports World.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
All the very best to you both, and finally with you, Steve Wilson and Alex Capstick. What is the best guess then? We've talked about the challenges that are coming for the IOC. There's also an executive board scheduled to meet in June, and Thomas Batt looking for re-election. If you could put a date down now, will you both go for the Summer Games? Are we going to reconvene in sort of July time 2021, Steve?
Yes, that would be my prediction. And I would also, look ahead to it in a positive way, because imagine the emotional impact these games could have next year with the world recovering from this crisis. These games could really be a message of hope and humanity, and really showing the triumph of the Olympic spirit. So look out for games that are maybe even more powerful than these games would have been this year.
Alex, a final thought from you?
Yeah, I agree with Steve, and symbolic as well that the Olympic flame has remained will remain in Tokyo until next year. That was a move that the IOC wanted. The Japanese, of course, accepted. I expect it to start in July next year, and I haven't been to Tokyo before, so I was really looking forward to it this year, and looking forward to it even more in 2021. But it will be fascinating to see how all the pieces fall into place over the next few months.
Yeah, you weren't the only one looking forward to it. Alex Capstick, Steve Wilson, thank you very much indeed. We'll continue to keep across this debate and discussion, the postponement of the Olympic and Paralympic Games. We have two more athletes, numerous medalists coming up in the next hour of Sports World.
This is the BBC World Service, where we bring you a daily coronavirus update.
Coronavirus. Self-isolation.
Extreme measures.
Still, the disease spreads.
As the coronavirus story develops, we're bringing you the very latest.
Many governments have announced new measures to try to contain the virus.
A daily roundup of news, information and health advice, and reports from affected areas.
We are in new territory.
The Coronavirus Global Update. Find it at bbcworldservice.com.
Sports World continues in the next hour here on the BBC World Service with more on the impact of the postponed 2020 Olympic and Paralympic Games. We'll be joined by two athletes, both hoping for gold in Tokyo next year, and hear from the BBC Women's Footballer of the Year. Stay with us.
On air, online and on mobile, this is the BBC World Service, the world's radio station. This is Sports World on the BBC World Service.
Hello, I'm Lee James. This is Sports World at 16 GMT. The International Olympic Committee President Thomas Bach has admitted finding a new date in 2021 for the Olympic and Paralympic Games is challenging. Find out what the athletes themselves would like to happen. We'll be joined by a reigning world champion and an 8-time Paralympic medalist.
I hate to lose, but when I lose, I learn and I change it around real quick, and I'm pretty determined.
Things can seem overwhelmingly impossible at times. I think once you go through all those things, you kind of realize that there's just nothing to prove.
And while the golds in Tokyo will have to wait, there is one bronze who's come out on top.
Free kick to England, wide right, drives it, into the box, Lucy Bronze, into the net!
More from the BBC Women's Footballer of the Year, England and Lyon's Lucy Bronze. We're back in 5 minutes.
Hello, I'm Aaron Safir with the BBC News. Spain has recorded its largest daily number of coronavirus deaths yet. It brings the total to nearly 5,700, second only to Italy worldwide. Guy Hedgecoe has more.
The number of daily deaths registered in Spain has been climbing steadily, and the latest figure, 832, is the highest so far. However, the government believes that the numbers are peaking, and the rate at which new infections are spreading does appear to be easing off. But the pressure on the Spanish health service is unrelenting, especially in the most affected areas, such as Madrid, Catalonia, and the Basque Country. The government is spending hundreds of millions of euros on importing medical equipment from China, and last night, over 1 million face masks were flown into Madrid.
The city where the coronavirus pandemic began, Wuhan in China, has partially reopened after more than 2 months of isolation. People are now being allowed to enter. Stephen McDonald reports.
People are still not allowed to leave Wuhan for another 2 weeks. But the first train services into the city at the heart of the coronavirus crisis have begun. Local transport connections for residents there are also resuming this weekend, including underground trains. Outside of Wuhan, other cities in Hubei province are opening again to the outside world. If China's official figures are to be believed, the crisis here appears to have stabilised. However, social distancing, strict quarantine, a drastic reduction in international flights, and a ban on most foreign citizens entering the country are all designed to minimise the chances of a re-explosion in infections.
The number of people in Britain dying with the coronavirus has risen above 1,000. Latest government figures show more than a quarter of the deaths happened in the 24 hours to Friday evening. Around 17,000 people have now tested positive for the virus in the UK. Officials have continued to stress the need for people to observe social distancing. Professor Jason Leach is from the Scottish Government.
Across all 4 UK countries, deaths are rising. That's just such a horrid thing to have to say, and none of us in these positions, in the governments and in the health services, want to see that. But everything we are doing is to try and reduce that number. So I have to admit, I kind of wanted it to rain today because I want people at all costs to stay at home as much as they can.
The head of the world's biggest manufacturer of ventilators in Germany has said demand is 10 times higher than his firm's capacity to produce them. Stefan Draeger told the newspaper Die Welt that his company had already doubled production and hoped to double again during the year. But he said that orders from the US alone amounted to a year's worth of total worldwide production. You're listening to the latest world news from the BBC. South Korea's foreign ministry says American officials have given approval for 3 companies to sell coronavirus testing kits to the United States. The clearance paves the way for large numbers of Korean kits to be exported. There's been criticism of a shortage of testing in the US, which now has the largest outbreak in the world. A comprehensive campaign of testing in South Korea has largely been successful in controlling the virus there. Kenya's Deputy President William Ruto has urged people to act with civility and restraint after they were accused of using excessive force to impose a nighttime curfew. The indefinite overnight ban on movement is part of efforts to control the spread of the coronavirus. Here's Ferdinand Omondi.
Videos were shared online of police appearing to tear gas and beat up citizens countrywide in some incidences well before the curfew began. Police spokesman Charles Wino said he regretted some incidents but insisted the curfew needed to be enforced. Many leaders and organizations have condemned the police actions. The Law Society of Kenya said it would move to court on Monday to challenge the curfew, which it says is unconstitutional and has now been abused by the police.
The Taliban says it won't participate in peace negotiations with a team announced by the Afghan government. A statement from the militant group said the team hadn't been selected in a way that included all Afghan factions. It accused the government of violating the recent deal agreed between the Taliban and the US. Households and landmarks across the globe are expected to switch off their lights for an hour this evening from 8:30 p.m. local time to mark Earth Hour, described as the world's largest grassroots movement for the environment. There'll be no public gatherings because of the coronavirus pandemic. The landmarks expected to take part include the Eiffel Tower in Paris, Sydney Opera House, and New York's Empire State Building. And that's the latest world news from the BBC.
On radio, online and on mobile, this is Sports World on the BBC World Service.
Hello, I'm Lee James. Welcome back to Sports World, and we'll continue to keep you regularly informed of the latest developments of the COVID-19 emergency here on the BBC World Service. A reminder, our next scheduled news bulletin is at 16:30 GMT. Already a different feel, as you know, to Sports World today, certainly from where I'm broadcasting from. We're following the strict measures brought in by the British government. I'm staying at home. You may have seen on social media, I'm literally broadcasting from the cupboard under my stairs, but we do have help. We have our studio manager Liam, we have our producer Tom back there, a safe distance apart, helping you to bring you this programme today, so thank you very much indeed. We're going to reflect more on the postponement of the 2020 Olympic and Paralympic Games over the next 20 minutes, and then we will hear from the BBC Women's Footballer of the Year, the England international and Lyon defender Lucy Bronze, and look at some of the challenges that the women's game is facing during this emergency. But with us now on Sports World, 2 women who were hoping to compete in the Olympic and Paralympic Games this summer in Tokyo. You may have heard our documentary recently on the BBC World Service on the remarkable story of Oksana Masters, the 8-time Paralympic champion, born in Ukraine 3 years after the Chernobyl nuclear disaster with severe physical defects caused by the exposure to radiation. She was adopted and raised in the USA and has gone on to win Paralympic medals in rowing before switching to cross-country skiing for the Winter Games, where she won her first Paralympic gold in Pyeongchang in 2018 and has reverted to cycling for the Tokyo Games. So, Oksana, thank you so much once again for joining us.
Oh my gosh, thank you. I'm excited to talk with you guys.
Well, thank you very much, and do check out that documentary, available on the BBC World Service website if you haven't heard it already. Oksana, we're getting a feel today of what it is like and what people's experiences are like at this very strange and disconcerting time. I understand you were training in Sweden when the outbreak got serious and you returned to the USA.
Yeah, it was crazy because, right, everything was normal. We had our official training day because it was our World Championships for biathlon. And then the morning of the race, the first race was an evening race, and woke up to a text that I thought was going to be our coach saying, morning, like, exciting first day or something, but it was that our event has been canceled. All events, 500 people up, have been canceled, and we were redirected on the next flight out the next morning. And I was like, what? I had to reread that a couple times because it just went from talk really, and Sweden at that time was such a small country, like it wasn't really affected yet either. The counts weren't really coming in as high, and it was a shock for sure.
And what's the situation like where you are now then in the US?
So currently I live in Illinois, and I'm in Champaign, Illinois, and the state has been on lockdown for about maybe a week now, and it's super eerie and just weird when you do go out to get groceries or any medication or anything else you need. Everything else is shut down, like the stores and all the gyms and the training facility, and super quiet, and it's just a really weird feeling. But at the same time, like, it kind of gives you an opportunity to enjoy being at home, which sometimes, for me personally, living out of a suitcase on the road, I don't get to do that. And now it kind of gives me more time to look at those things that I normally don't have an opportunity and the time to really put into.
Absolutely, and it's what it is all about, staying safe, and if we can play our part by staying at home, that is what we're doing. You're in Illinois. Let's move across the United States to San Diego. The American BMX racer, the two-time world champion, Olympic silver medalist, Elise Willoughby, joins us on Sports Squad. Hello, Elise.
Hi, thank you for having me.
And what is the situation like with you at the moment? I have this wonderful, well, lack of view of the cupboard that I'm broadcasting from at home. What are things like in San Diego at the moment?
Well, we do have sunshine, so that's great. But it is, California has been in a state of lockdown as well for a little over a week now. And kind of as Oksana was saying, it's just, it's weird. It's a ghost town. It's usually hustle bustle. But in saying that, there are a lot of families out doing their, like, family walks. People that are in, like, quarantine together or staying in their homes together are allowed to go out together, obviously. So there are a lot more people actually out on a bike together or walking together, which is actually a little bit refreshing to see with families, dogs getting walked and all of that. But it's all very dispersed. But as far as grocery stores and pharmacies, like Oksana was saying, it's very desolate everywhere you go because the only things open are those necessity-based things, and the lines are basically letting a couple people into these places at a time. Everyone's in gloves and masks and all sorts of stuff, so everything's getting wiped down constantly. So you're waiting out the front of the store for 20, 30, I don't know, even longer minutes, waiting to have your turn essentially to go in, so that they can keep the numbers down in anywhere that it is open.
Absolutely, to remain that distance, to keep that social distancing. You mentioned the pets as well, that they play a role in this. I noticed on social media you also describe yourself, Elise, as a fur mama. So who's the furry one that you're looking at?
I have a beautiful little dog named Mila, and she was a rescue. She's 6 now, and she is providing my husband and I lots of entertainment in this downtime. So we're locked at home, but as Oksana was saying, as athletes, we've been on the go a lot for the start of the year as well, and our dog is happy we're home. So.
You're all together. That's the main thing. Oksana, what is it like though? Because things are very different. You know, you haven't got your usual training routines, and whilst you can appreciate that time at home, as athletes, is that difficult? You're used to that structure, and there are no planned events at the moment, no training sessions as such to go to. What's that like?
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge, but thankfully with my sport for cycling, I have a home trainer here, and I can do the workouts on inside. And now that I finally have the second half of my bike that was missing from the transition from the winter side to Illinois, and I'm able to train, but what I'm not able to do is go to the gym. And as a Paralympic athlete, it gives me a limited ability to be creative because I rely only on my hands. There's certain ways I can do things and certain things I cannot do, which is kind of fun and frustrating to get super creative around the house. But for me, I think what's a big challenge is all the events I was looking at, because I'm technically not qualified for my spot for Tokyo yet, and those have been canceled. And they have been canceled or postponed. And it's kind of a little bit of like, you still have to be training and somewhat be in good form, because you don't know when the race will be next and when it's going to be the race to qualify or anything like that. And as of right now, UCI hasn't officially canceled or postponed our World Championships, but I think we're in June, and so I'm kind of just, it's a little bit, I think they're going to be, but you don't know, so it's a little bit of uncertainty of like, oh my gosh, when can I qualify? When am I going to know what the qualifying dates are so I can be ready? And yeah, but at the same time, if I focus on all that stress, then that's just lost energy into something that is completely out of all of our control. And instead, like, I could focus my energy into putting in to each day and like the workout on that bike, or getting creative with using, when I do planks, I have my running legs and I'll use my second half of my leg for extra weight and stuff.
So you're adapting to what you've got around you then, to what you're doing.
Yes.
At least, what is it like for you in terms of your training and with your husband as well? And again, another former Olympic silver medalist. You both have been with us on Sports World in the past and told us about Sam's situation, the life-changing injuries that he suffered after his training crash in 2016. How is Sam, and how are you both coping at this time?
Yeah, well, let's start with Oksana is adapting because I challenged her to the push-ups, the 10 in, 10 out.
Oh,
She
really?
did it.
Girl, I
So,
tried to do the push-up clap ones that you were doing, and I'm like, it's not happening. It's not going public.
Right, Elise, tell us what this was. What was your challenge to Oksana?
Well, it's been going around all of social that you see 10 and then you give 10 for push-ups. And I was challenged by one of my friends. She's like, you could do the clap ones, couldn't you? And I was like, I don't know. But anyways,
So this is a push-up and a clap each time.
Yeah,
push-up
you push up and do a clap. But the challenge is really just to do the push-up. It's not really to do the clap. I just was challenged to do the clap. So yeah, I nominated my Team Toyota athlete teammates, and Oksana made it happen with ease, I tell you. So she is.
So you just
she is
breezed this, Oksana, did you?
Well, I didn't do the clap, so.
Well, and then going along to kind of how it's been affecting us, we're similar. Obviously, BMX racing is also cycling discipline that falls under the UCI. So, as Oksana was saying, it's been kind of a whirlwind as far as I was competing in very early March for our national championship and another international event that we hosted at the Houston track. That is where our world championships were also meant to be held at the end of May. So all was tracking well. I won the first 2 World Cups in Australia this year. We were set to have a great, a World Cup in the U.S., then we'd have the World Championships, and then the Olympics. So it was kind of tracking along really nicely, and exciting times for U.S. riders, of course. And then as soon as we got back from Houston, it was like one day after the other, things were being postponed or canceled around the globe, and it was just, it was crazy. We didn't know what to think or what was going to happen. There were some other events over in Europe that were starting to get postponed and canceled. I know there's one in the UK, World Cup, that was the first one to have to postpone. And it felt inevitable and like only a matter of time until we would hear on our events here in the US and obviously eventually the Olympics. But it's just been this time of uncertainty, and as Oksana was saying, qualifying and certain events are pretty critical, and they're not done yet. I am personally sitting in a pretty good position, but there are still races on that qualifying calendar that have yet to either
and potentially a World Championship as well, Elise, coming up as well in Houston.
Exactly. So, and that's a very important race as a well, for anyone anyway, but obviously as a defending world champion and being at home world championships, it's huge on our radar. and so you want to be ready, and you don't want to lose form. We've kind of all worked in this 4-year quadrennial, and obviously with Sam at my side here since coaching me since 2017, we've had a plan in place, and we've worked out some of the kinks in the training regimen, and just this was the home stretch. You're preparing to peak in July, and then this comes up, and you don't know. You just don't know the timeline anymore, as Oksana was saying. Like, all of those things still remain important, and you don't necessarily have to completely change your plan, but it does affect when and how and where, all of those things. So you're in this time of limbo, and you want to stay semi-ready, but the daily motivation, you have to dig deep to find that when you're waiting to kind of hear when that target goal dates are.
Exactly, and when you don't know what's ahead of you when those races are. So instead of all that competitive juices flowing on the bike or whatever you may be competing at for both of you, has it changed now with home life? Is it about the board games at home? Are you still competitive though, no matter what you're doing, both of you?
We do have the pool table running pretty heavily at the house, so hopefully I come out a better pool player. But we did also rush over to get a little bit of equipment. Obviously, I'm lucky in having the training centers and gyms right here normally, but with that getting shut down, and obviously for Sam using the public gym quite often, and that's something that brings him exercise and just health for him. He was like, we need to get a couple things so that I can work out at home. This is going to get shut down. And literally hours after we went and got a couple things to put in our garage, it did get shut down. So we've set up a little bit of things at home as far as a gym goes, and I'm able to help him do some of the stuff that he was doing at the other gym, but obviously we're lacking a lot of equipment and whatnot, so we're getting creative, as Oksana said, but then I'm also able to do some of my stuff and ride the bike either outside if possible. Luckily, our distances aren't as long as Oksana's maybe, so we're able to get outside a little bit. He comes with me to do that, but we're away from everybody, and really just trying to keep that motivation there is the hardest thing when you don't have that target.
That's the tough thing. Oksana, is that the same for you then? If the skis and the hand cycle have been put away, the board games come out instead?
Well, so my boyfriend is also a Paralympic athlete, Aaron. He does training for Tokyo as well, and he also does cross-country skiing. So we're very competitive on, with board games. I've been banned to play Risk completely because I get territorial with Ukraine, and that's my one rule, and they don't follow it. But at the same time, so in the mornings, we'll do workouts in the garage together, which is really cool, with Elise and your husband able to have that partner there, supporting you. You guys are going through this together, isolated together at time. But at the same time, I learned that Aaron makes the best pancakes.
Oh, new skills have been discovered.
Yeah, and really appreciating the cooking skills that he has, because unfortunately mine are lacking, and I gotta step it up. But
and maybe you can cheat a little bit now with food. You can it doesn't matter so much, does it now? Just for a little while, maybe.
Yeah. Definitely. A little bit of cheating has been going on, because you got to keep the soul happy.
Yeah, you've earned a cheat meal, I say, Oksana. We ordered a Traeger pellet grill, a smoker, right when we got back. Yeah, and I have been going ham on that thing.
Going on.
Yeah.
A bit of grill envy. Well, I think you've earned it. I think you've earned the right to have a little bit of a cheat, little pancakes and things like that. World domination of a different kind, Oksana, when you're playing Risk then, rather than competing in the Paralympics. Yeah, I see what's going on there. I also saw on your social media, Oksana, when we come back to thinking about when we're going to reconvene again and have the Olympic and Paralympics and bring everyone together, I saw your very powerful message on social media about having that strength and that resilience and for people coming together, and hopefully when we all can do that once more, maybe things will be even stronger, that those bonds that we share with each other.
Yes, I definitely think that. I mean, definitely as the U.S. and Team USA, we are stronger together, and we're going to be in Tokyo stronger than ever. But at the same time, everyone in Tokyo, when that time comes, this is something that is such a sad, devastating event that's happening, but it's something we are experiencing together, and we'll be able to have a better experience when the time is ready and be united on such a different, bigger, globally, more important level than just sport. And I think that's the beauty of sport, is that it brings people all together. But then when we're sitting next to the person in the stand, you look to your left and you look to your right. I think hopefully when this is all resolved, and we'll appreciate each individual person as a person more, and their health and our safety and our lives and their lives more than I think we used to in the past, and just overlooking that person.
Well, exactly. The people that are making sacrifices for us right now are medical professionals, those on the front line that are dealing with the coronavirus emergency. But both of you, but Oksana, you've had to go through difficult times in your life. What would your message be then to others maybe listening to this around the world at the moment that are feeling worried and scared about what is happening? What would you have to say to them?
I think through just different periods of my life, I've realized that I have the choice whether I can make this to be my forever, and this is the mindset I want to be in forever, or not. And I think that's the same with everybody, is in really, really dark times, or like uncertain times when you don't know what is going to happen next, and things are just completely out of your control. And enjoy the moment that you're in with the people that are there, or you are able to talk to and FaceTime and connect, and those people who support you. And this is not forever. This is just a temporary thing. It has put all of our lives a little bit on hold, and has made us kind of forced us to redirect our path into each of our goals and dreams, regardless if it doesn't matter if it's like Olympic dreams, or if it's a student or a doctor. It doesn't end. The dreams don't end. The goals don't end. It's just a detour. And that's the only way we should be looking at it, is a detour, and embracing the things and the opportunities that are coming because of this, like spending time with your family, or at least you guys being entertained by your dog. Just like those kind of things.
And also at least that power of sport that we have, to bring the world together. It isn't the most important thing in the world right now, a postponement of a sporting event, but it has that power, doesn't it, to bring us together?
And I think that's the beauty of the Olympics in particular. And, it does bring the whole world together, watching over those 4 weeks of Olympic and Paralympic Games. And I think that, as on hold as we are right now, I think athletes around the world need to continue to be a light for others that maybe aren't always put in these uncertain situations. This is what athletes train to do. They train to adapt. They train to set goals and break everything down to the hour of what they're doing, the minute of what they're doing. And right now, the goal is stay home. The goal is to get healthy, to keep the elderly healthy. And until that goal changes, we're going to stay there. We're going to do our part there. And then as people can go out and find, whether they have qualifying events that they need to do or whatever it is, it's uncertain and limbo. But they're going to continue to work and put their best foot forward, and not know, what. They're not entitled to anything working out. The circumstances may change, but they're going to continue to give their best. And no matter what you do in life, I think that people can draw on that. And hopefully then, a year from now, or a little less than a year from now, whenever the Olympics do take place, hopefully, like Oksana was saying, then when the world comes together again and looks at that one stage together again, we can appreciate that, and we can really appreciate sport and the light it's brought us.
Absolutely. We're almost out of time, but thank you so much, both of you, for being with us. Oksana, enjoy the pancakes cooked by Aaron, and at least spending time with Sam and the little doggy as well. Thank you both so much, and the grill, of course. Let's not forget the grill. Elise Willoughby, Oksana Masters, thank you so much for being with us.
This is the BBC World Service, where Linda Presley brings us the second in a new series following people on their gender journeys.
I was researching about other experiences and areas. Actually, a lot of those things that trans men tell me are very similar to what I experienced. As a kid, I wanted to be a boy.
This is Naila, 24, born female. She lived as a trans man. And this is her partner, Ellie.
I was passing as a man. I was passing so well. I felt like I got so many comments of people telling me that my transition was such a success because they couldn't tell I was trans. I was so shy to tell anyone that I was trans.
Naila and Ellie are both detransitioners, presenting again as female.
Oh, these physical changes that I experienced during my transition helped me develop a closer relationship to my body.
We're exploring how and why some trans people are returning to their assigned birth gender. Detransitioners at bbcworldservice.com/documentaries.
Still to come on Sports World with me, Lee James. We'll hear from the winner of the BBC Women's Footballer of the Year for 2020, the England international and Lyon defender Lucy Bronze, and assess the impact the COVID-19 pandemic is having on women's football. Can UEFA really stage both its men's and women's showpiece international tournaments around the same time next year? There's plenty to discuss when we return in 2 minutes.
BBC News with Aaron Safir. Spain has recorded 832 coronavirus deaths in the past 24 hours, its largest number yet. It brings the total to more than 5,500, second only to Italy worldwide. Health officials suggest the true figure could be higher, as suspected cases who died without being tested aren't included. Wuhan, where the outbreak began, has been partially opened up for the first time since it was cut off from the rest of China 2 months ago. Thousands of people wearing masks and protective gear disembarked from sold-out high-speed trains. The head of the world's biggest manufacturer of ventilators has said demand is 10 times higher than his firm's capacity to produce them. Stefan Drager said his company in northern Germany had already doubled production, but orders from the US alone amounted to a year's worth of total worldwide sales. The number of people in Britain dying as a result of the virus has risen above 1,000. About 17,000 people have now tested positive. Among them is another cabinet minister. South Korea's foreign ministry says American officials have given approval for 3 companies to sell coronavirus testing kits to the United States. The clearance paves the way for large numbers of Korean kits to be exported. Kenya's deputy president has urged police to act with civility and restraint after they were accused of using excessive force to impose a nighttime curfew. The indefinite overnight ban on movement is part of efforts to control the spread of the virus. Batons and tear gas were used against passengers hoping to board a ferry in Mombasa. The Taliban say they won't participate in peace talks with an Afghan government team announced on Thursday. The militants say the 21-member team hadn't been selected in a way that included all Afghan factions. They accused the government of violating a recent deal between the Taliban and the United States.
On radio, online and on mobile. This is Sports World on the BBC World Service.
Hello, I'm Lee James. Different feel to Sports World today. We've been discussing the postponement of the Olympic and Paralympic Games to 2021. No live sport today, but one special accolade was handed out this week to the England international and Lyon defender, who was named the BBC Women's Footballer of the Year.
Here's Lucy Bronze!
It's nice when it's the fans, you know, the people that support women's football when they vote for you as their favourite player or their player of the year. It just feels kind of nice to have that support.
What would it feel like if we told you now that you have won the BBC Women's Footballer of the Year for 2020?
Really?
Yes, really.
Okay. A surprise? I expected someone to walk in the door. That happened last time when my auntie showed up to give me the award. No, I wasn't expecting that at all.
Lucy Bronze, on behalf of the BBC World Service, we are delighted to let you know that you are the BBC Women's Footballer of the Year for 2020.
Massive congratulations. I just want to say you continue to push women's football in this country to new levels.
Former England footballer Alex Scott
she kind of brought me through the England team. Even now we speak now, I'm really good friends.
It's been an amazing role model for so many young girls, and I have to say young boys, to grow up and aspire to be like Lucia, tough bronze.
Playing when I was younger was, I just want to beat my brother, I want to do what he does.
This award specifically, I think, is testament to how much of a dedicated professional you are and how much you're an inspiration to not only us, but many, many more across the globe.
Away from Wembley, there's a huge match in Budapest where defending champions Lyon meets Barcelona in the Women's Champions League final.
That one was really special this year. I was a lot happier with how I performed. It's the marquee game of the year in women's football, and I feel like as a Lyon team we really put on a real good show, and a real good show for women's football. For me, the World Cup, I was so disappointed because I had my mind set on winning this World Cup, getting to the final, but everything to do with the World Cup now, to me, I just kind of feels a bit sad.
There's no player like her in the world. There's no player that's got her athleticism, her quality, and I'm very lucky.
To score a goal like that at right back, from right back, incredible.
You know, you got to have someone there, not just the goal scorers, not just the people at the top. It's nice that defenders kind of have that little light on them as well.
But I think what you've seen tonight, Lucy Bronze is the best player in the world.
She's the best right back in the world, without any question.
Lucy Bronze, fantastic stride. She is the talk of the town.
I look at the list now and think everybody knows who these girls are, so I think that's definitely pretty special.
That is your BBC Women's Footballer of the Year, the England and Lyon defender Lucy Bronze. A little different this time around, understandably, but you still heard there Sports World's Sarah Moore-Kerrans able to surprise the winner, Lucy Bronze. Sarah is with us now. It did feel a little different, didn't it, Sarah? But she was still surprised. She wasn't expecting that call, was she?
No, she wasn't. I'm so glad we were able to keep up that. It's been such a lovely part of this award over the last 6 years, is surprising the winner and having somebody random that they're not expecting turn up in some, locker room or a dressing room or their home like last year. This year, obviously, it was different. We still managed to set it up. We did a Skype interview that we had said was going to be about how she's coping now in training and, amid the coronavirus pandemic, and we got her up on Skype and we were in the BBC studio, and mid-conversation we just threw in this question about the award, and she was surprised, so I was really glad. I was really glad we got to do that, and she won the award 2 years ago, so she's had this surprise in person, and it was just, it was a different way of doing it, but it was still really nice to be able to kind of have something to hold on to from, normality and stuff like that, so it was
Absolutely.
Wonderful.
Well, she still thought you were going to be coming in the door, by the sound of it. She has won it for the second time, as she mentioned, and a lot of competition this time around from World Cup winners from the United States team. Megan Rapinoe finished third. Julie Ertz was also nominated as well. And Lucy Bronze, though, coming out on top in what has been an outstanding year in terms of the achievements on the field, but also in terms of the voting, the highest number of votes in the 6-year history of the BBC Women's Footballer of the Year. So a deserved winner, you would say then, Sarah?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, we have seen women's football over the years. There's been various points where we say, wow, this is great, it's arrived, and it's, I suppose, a continual arriving. But the Women's World Cup in France was different, and I think we saw that by the fact of, the huge number of people who engaged with this public vote this year, and also the fact that everybody knew these footballers, and also that everybody knew them beyond their names. They knew them about their skills, and they knew them about what they brought on the pitch. And for Lucy Bronze, she is the best defender in the world. She's a wonderful right back. This is the second time she has won the award, but even over the last 2 years since she won it for the first time, she has developed as a player. She just is at the heart of a team from right back. She drives everything forward. She's a brilliant part of that Lyon team that won the treble last year with the league, the cup, and then the Champions League. She also was part of the England squad last year who won the She Believes Cup, defeating the USA, and that was a big achievement for them. I know she views the World Cup as a disappointment going out in the semi-finals, but she was a big part of their progress throughout that tournament. She scored a wonderful goal within that as you know, a defender. Always nice to see that. And I think a lot of it about Lucy now is about her mentality and how she has grown into herself as a person and her role within you know, the team on the pitch, and also how she is vocal about the women's game. But there's lots of people around the world of football and women's football in particular who view her as, you know, one of the best players. So let's hear from a couple of people now, because I don't think you get much more you know, praise coming from, you know, if you're an England player, than coming from Kelly Smith. She is a legend of the game in England, and she says that Lucy's time in the USA at the very start of Lucy's career benefited Lucy's career.
I think her experience at North Carolina, she took herself off to university over there and played under Anton Dorrance, and his winning mentality and the will to win and drive and perform day in, day out at training and the highest level in collegiate soccer, that made her as a player. And she's obviously brought all that knowledge back to the England side and really pushed certain individuals on in that England side. I love her winning mentality. She hates losing, and I think that needs to happen more in the England setup. But for me, her work rate, her energy up and down that right flank, she's such a threat when she overlaps. Normally when she's got a good 1v1 situation, she's normally comes out on top. She's got a good understanding with Nikita Paris, and she's scored a couple of really good cracking goals that any striker would be proud of. But she's coming from deep and doing that, or, you know, from across, and she just settles herself and strikes the ball so cleanly. She's playing with such elite players at Lyon. It's just made her such a better player. You know, she's training with Renard, Marijon, Lasoma. These are world-class players, and Lucy's now put herself in that forefront.
Yeah, and Heather, that was one of the things that Lucy spoke about when she first moved to Lyon, that she suddenly was like, oh, I'm going to have to get better at playing on the ball. But she's always somebody who likes to push and challenge herself and backs herself in that way to get better.
Lucy's confidence sort of pours out of her, and I think, you know, she likely is the best right back in the world, but I think that she's proven herself to be a complete footballer, and that's what everybody sort of admires about her. I think that Phil Neville even gave her a couple matches this calendar year in the center of the park, playing center midfield for the national team, and you know, and that was him saying, we actually can use Lucy more. She's that good. She's not afraid to put herself into environments that will cause growth. And like Kelly said, she came over as a young kid to American University, which I know is a big step for a teenager. And then to move when you know, you're in a comfortable situation there in England at Man City, but she decided to take the jump to go live in France and to train day in and day out with the best players, some of the best players in the world. And it's that kind of courage that I admire about Lucy, and it's definitely helped the England team.
And finally, Kelly, on Lucy, I know she was so bitterly disappointed, wasn't she, at the semi-final defeat, because it was in Lyon. She's playing there now. She felt it was on home soil, and she really took it to heart.
Yeah, she would. She wanted to perform to the highest level that she knows she can, and she didn't feel like she did that. That's Lucy full on. She always wants to perform and get 10 out of 10, and that's what I love about Lucy. She's so strong mentally, and she always wants to win and be the best player that she can be.
That is Kelly Smith, former Arsenal and England legend, and Heather O'Reilly of the United States, with Sarah Mulcairns, who is still with us, reflecting on Lucy Bronze, the second time she has won the BBC Women's Footballer of the Year. Let's also hear from someone who has faced her on the pitch. Mandy van den Berg, European Championship winner with the Netherlands, is with us now on Sports World. So, Mandy, give us an insight into what Lucy is like. Then you've gone up against her before when you played in English football for Liverpool against Manchester City. What was she like?
Well, for me, she's the best fullback there is at the moment in the world, honestly. So we have discussed her in one of your programs before, and she's a player that is so complete. And as a fullback, I mean, the role of a fullback, most of the times we usually don't talk about that much, because it's more about the midfielders, about the attackers, the central defenders, but the fullbacks we forget a little bit about. But she's definitely a player that you just cannot forget about it, because she just makes a big mark. She just put a big mark on the game. She has a big input in the games, and she's so complete, so strong. Physically, she's brilliant, but technically and yeah, in the role of her team she plays, for me, she's absolutely the best fullback at the moment.
Well, congratulations to Lucy Bronze, redefining that role, that fullback role, and a deserved winner then of the BBC Women's Footballer of the Year. So, Mandy, we're going to look at the impact that the coronavirus pandemic is having on the women's game now, with Sarah as well. And let me ask you, Mandy, first of all, what the situation has been like for you. You play for Valencia in Spain, and of course a lot of difficulties there, and a very sad and desperate situation in the country. And I know with the men's team, around 35% of the players have tested positive for the coronavirus, largely due to the fact that they played in Italy against Atalanta in the Champions League tie. What is the situation like there, Mandy? Give us an idea.
Well, the situation is not that positive. I mean, Spain is in a total lockdown situation here, so we only can leave our house to just go to the closest supermarket or doctor, and that's it. So we are not allowed to just walk on the street, to be outside to get some fresh air or anything like that. So the situation here in Spain and here in Valencia is very, very serious. I mean, the situation in the club Valencia is even worse, because there are many players tested positive. As far as I know, in our team, in the women's part, is everyone healthy for as far as we know. But yeah, that the situation is critical, and that it's so serious is a fact.
Yes, it's so desperately worrying for so many people. What have you been told, and what are you doing right now? You're still there in Valencia?
Yeah, I'm still here in Valencia. We are in touch with our club, and we get like stuff to do in the house. I mean, there are some players that has a little balcony or even has a garden, but I mean, some of us just has their own place and nothing, no opportunity to go outside. So you just have to be very creative to keep up with your fitness, with your strength, which is really hard, of course. But I mean, that's the situation. I think it's a very good decision to keep us inside, to keep us the place where we are. And I mean, yeah, the situation is far from ideal, but the most important thing is that we get rid of this virus as soon as possible, and that we get the amount of people that get infected or that dies, that we can get that as low as possible. So I mean, we have to be very creative. We get like schedules from the club. We are training every day to do stuff inside the house, and try to keep as fit as possible with this stuff we do.
Well, Mandy, we wish you the very best, and the rest of your teammates as well at this difficult time. Stay with us, because we're going to look at the impact that the coronavirus pandemic could have on women's football. And as we've said throughout sports world today, clearly the cancellation, the postponement of elite sport isn't the most important thing at the moment. It is about protecting those around the world that are in danger, and no area of society is going to be immune from this crippling disease, whatever the consequences are down the line. Clearly football is no different, and women's football is no different. Amanda van der Voort, the chief women's football officer for FIFPro, which is the global players union, has said that the coronavirus pandemic could be a major setback to the growth and progress we've made as an industry, and has called for a smart and collaborative approach and a common vision, uniting national strategies. What, Sarah, are the main concerns at the moment surrounding the game? Because clearly, without players playing, there are issues over contracts, and when we're going to see football again.
Yeah, I think this is multi-layered, Lee, when you look at the women's game. Firstly, you look at the big tournaments, and we know that next year we were due to have the Women's Euros held in England in the summer of 2021. We now know that the Men's Euros have been pushed back a year to 2021. At the moment, the Women's Euros would be due to begin as the Men's Euros would be ending. We're not sure whether they will go ahead yet or not as planned on those dates. dates, or potentially that the women's Euros may be pushed to 2022. We also know that in the women's game, the Olympics is very significant in terms of women's football. I know in the men's game, it's perhaps less valued, but in the women's game, it really is a big trophy and a medal to achieve. We know the Olympics has now been pushed back to 2021. We're waiting to see from the International Olympic Committee when in 2021 that would be held, because you would have potentially teams in Europe competing at a Euros, also then having to compete at an Olympics. You would have the world champions, the USA, not having to compete in the Euros and then being able to go into an Olympics. So there are so many things to think about in terms of those big global calendars. And you also look at the fact that there are still some qualifiers for those Euros to take place as well that have been postponed. So that's it in terms of the competitions globally. Then you look at the domestic leagues around the world. In the USA, the NWSL is their league. They were due to be in pre-season right now. That has been postponed. It is due to start in the middle of April. That will now be delayed. You look at here where we are in England, you have the Women's Super League. That has obviously been postponed. We know that today the FA news has emerged that they want to continue on with that they don't want to have to call that season null and void. But we know that the two tiers below, so tiers 3 and 4, have been told that they will be null and void and that all results will be expunged from the record books. A lot of those clubs are unhappy with that. And then you look at player welfare. I know Mandy is in Spain, and I know recently in Spain there has been a lot around players' wages, because let's remember, women footballers around the world do not make a significant amount of money. They, in often cases, some may have, the practicalities of other jobs or studies on the side, and it's only really in the last couple of years that professionalism has come in. And these contracts that these players have are generally a year, maximum 2 years. So it's a very insecure profession for women in comparison to the top male footballers, who we know have been all taking wage cuts to help facilitate different spending around the clubs. And in Spain, where Mandy is, we've seen that there had been this collective bargaining to have a minimum salary brought in. I think it's this month, where if you're a full-time player, you would have 16,000 euros paid to you. If you're a part-time player, your minimum would be 12,000 euros. And now there's all sorts of questions about whether clubs can continue to afford to pay their players, to pay their staff, when the women's game, it does need an awful lot of support financially. So there are so many questions, and I'm sure so many worries, like there are for many people in all different walks of life, dealing with how they function and how they get money in and how they feed themselves and their families and keep a roof over their head. There are so many worries with this.
Absolutely. Let's pick up on a couple of those issues you've highlighted then, Sarah, with Mandy van den Berg, who is with us, who's currently playing for Valencia, the former Netherlands international. Sarah mentioned there about players on relatively short-term contracts, and even for clubs that are associated with parent men's clubs that who could also be struggling, of course, financially as a result of this. How concerning is that for the game going forward?
Well, as you said before, that's very concerning, because it's like the women's game is growing so quickly, but at the same time it's so young, it's so fresh. We are kind of starting to get things so much bigger, and yes, it's growing super quick, and yes, it's going unbelievable fast, but it's at the same time it's we are far from there yet, far from being secure and safe salary-wise. And of course there are players that their situation is way better or way higher than the other players, which is in men's football as well. But the bottom players in men's football still have a very, very, very decent salary, and the bottom players in women's football, that's far from decent in many situations. Which we have, if we talk about the top players, of course they have a better situation, but in general for women's football, this is very concerning, of course, because the circumstances and just to say it very simple, the money in women's football is not there yet to to be very calm and relaxed at the moment about this.
Do you worry then that teams could fold, potentially? Players will be discarded as a result of this?
Yeah, well, I think that could be a possibility. Definitely, if you see how clubs get affected right now by what's going on in the world, these are serious problems. It's not something that like one club is dealing with, or there are some players dealing with. It is a very big issue. So I definitely think that this will give a lot of issues and problems to many clubs. And yeah, as you say, I believe that many clubs can have a problem after all of this, by continuing the same way as they did before. I think this will have a lot of consequences.
And Sarah, that's when we'll need the clubs and the governing bodies and everyone to rise to this challenge then, to provide support to try and ensure that this doesn't happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And we know that governments in different countries are providing different levels of support for workers, and football clubs, I know, have been liaising with the governments in terms of where that leaves them, how they can also protect their employees, particularly within the women's game. If the club isn't making an awful lot of money, they are applying in different countries to get that government support to be able to continue on paying players. And then I think you do also have to look at the governing bodies, and the biggest one is FIFA, global governing body. You know, its aim, it's a non-profit organisation, its aim is to protect, to continue to grow and to support and foster the game of football all around the world. So I think that collectively, you know, there will be an awful lot of conversations going on between all the key stakeholders in football, the likes of FIFPro and that who speak for players, and then the clubs and the leagues around the world really have to come together and look at how they best protect the whole ecosystem of football from the top right down to the bottom. That if we want to get to wherever we are in 6 months' time potentially, and we want to just re-pick up this game of football and be able to go back to it and enjoy it in every single different way, it has all got to exist again.
Absolutely, and as you were saying, Sarah, the FA here in England hoping to complete the Women's Super League season. We need to see a conclusion to the situation. It's not just in the men's game, in the women's game. Manchester City only have a point advantage over Chelsea, who have a game in hand, so a lot of issues to be decided on the pitch. And then, Mandy, it comes to the issue of the Women's Euros next summer. We've been discussing throughout Sports World today, when will the Olympic and Paralympic Games be rescheduled? We seem to be edging towards another July Olympics, and that would clash with the European Championship due to be held here in England, and it would overlap with the men's tournament that has now been moved back to 2021. What needs to happen there? That surely can't happen, can it, all in the same summer?
No, I think if you talk about quality, but also about like organizing tournaments like this, and the not only the quality of games, but like the quality of the tournament itself for all the fans around the world, for the players, of course, themselves, for staff. It seems almost impossible to have two big tournaments at the same time in women's football. So, I mean, I know there are a lot of things that they are spoken about, but I mean, one of the options is to replace the Euros to 2022, which will be difficult as well. So I mean, whatever decision is going to be made, it's going to be a very, very hard one, a very tough one. But I mean, for me, it seems almost impossible to have like two tournaments in one summer.
And a final thought then from both of you. We're almost out of time, but again, without having the showpiece tournament, the European Championship, almost to itself in 2021, there is now a danger of the game being crowded out. So maybe, Sarah, 2022, is that a possible solution?
Yeah, it is potentially, and it would give the women's game a platform on its own. And I know UEFA have spoken about the fact that they want to be able to give it the time, the energy, the resources, and the space to have it thrive.
And Mandy, hopefully that's what we get to see, and hopefully get to see you back playing again soon. We're not sure what's going to happen, of course, but we wish you the very best.
Thank you very much.
So Mandy van den Berg has been with us, and Sarah Mulkerens, thank you very much as well for that surprise for Lucy Bronze, who is the BBC Women's Footballer of the Year, and for those discussions that are going to go on over the weeks, which we'll be reflecting here on Sports World. We may not have the live sport at the moment, but it has been good to be with you today to reflect what is happening in the sporting world, the postponement of the Olympic and Paralympic Games, and some of those issues that we've been discussing there that is affecting women's football. John Bennett will be here on Sunday from 15 GMT. There is a clock change, so 15 GMT on Sunday, and I'll be back next Saturday from 14 GMT with Sports World.
Sports World is a BBC Sport production for the BBC World Service.
You're listening to the BBC World Service, keeping you up to date and informed. The coronavirus is changing life for all of us around the globe.
India, with its 1.3 billion population, is anxious and nervous.
Here at the BBC World Service, we're bringing you regular roundups.
We are all in this together.
All the latest medical information and reports from affected areas, here on the BBC World Service. Hello and a warm welcome to the BBC World Service. Normally at this time, we'd be heading back to Sports World. However, due to the global spread of coronavirus, we have made some changes to our schedule. The Real Story is next on the BBC World Service, the world's radio station.
BBC World Service. This is Ritul Shah with The Real Story. One topic, 1 hour every week. And this week, COVID-19 is taking lives and disrupting economies. The pandemic's ushered in a time of insecurity and uncertainty. Governments will be measured by their ability to cope. Will their reliance on scientists steer us away from the emotional appeal of populist rhetoric? As people adjust to lockdowns, the way we live and work is being drastically altered. But is it also changing who and what we value? Will family relationships be strengthened or stretched to breaking point? Will there be a new emphasis on community, especially in the anonymous urban centres? And will the battle to prioritise climate change be catapulted to the top of the political agenda, or will it be relegated downwards in the scramble for an economic recovery? Could a lethal virus provide humanity with new insights? How will the coronavirus change us? That's The Real Story from the BBC, coming up after the news.
Hello, I'm Aaron Safir with the BBC News. Spain has recorded its largest daily number of coronavirus deaths yet, 832 in the past 24 hours. That brings the total to nearly 5,700, second only to Italy worldwide. The Spanish Health Ministry's emergencies coordinator, Fernando Simon, said the numbers might indicate that the outbreak was reaching its peak in parts of the country, but he warned that could still mean that hospital intensive care units were about to come under even greater pressure.
Los pacientes que se infectan hoy van a tener necesidad.
Patients who become infected today will need a bed in an intensive care unit within 7 to 10 days or even a little later. In other words, that ICU saturation is delayed with respect to disease transmission, which implies we're going to get to that ICU saturation point by the end of next week or early next week. So we have to make extra efforts to control the transmission.
Wuhan, where the coronavirus outbreak began, has been partially opened up for the first time since it was cut off from the rest of China 2 months ago. Thousands of people wearing masks and protective gear disembarked from sold-out high-speed trains. The head of the world's biggest manufacturer of ventilators in Germany has said demand is 10 times higher than his firm's capacity to produce them. Here's Damien McGuinness.
Governments from all over the globe are ordering ventilators from us, says Stefan Dreger. He has doubled production and hopes to double again this year. But demand is 10 times what his firm can produce. The US alone has ordered 100,000 ventilators, which is the total number manufactured every year globally. And the German government has placed an order for 10,000 additional machines for German hospitals. But components come from all over the world, and Mr. Dreger warns that export bans could limit supplies and hamper production.
Damien McGuinness reporting. The number of people in Britain dying with the coronavirus has risen above 1,000. Latest government figures show more than a quarter of the deaths happened in the 24 hours to Friday evening. Angus Crawford reports.
This is the biggest day-on-day rise in the numbers of deaths from the coronavirus since the outbreak began, up by more than a third since Friday. The 246 people who died in England were aged between 33 and 100. All but 13 of them had underlying health problems. The government also announced it would start the testing of frontline health workers who have symptoms or who live with people who may also have the virus. Critical care doctors and nurses will be prioritised.
Angus Crawford reporting on the situation in Britain. You're listening to the latest world news from the BBC. Kenya's Deputy President William Ruto has urged police to act with civility and restraint after they were accused of using excessive force to impose a nighttime curfew. The indefinite overnight ban on movement is part of efforts to control the spread of the coronavirus. Batons and tear gas were used against passengers hoping to board a ferry in Mombasa on Friday before the curfew took effect. People living in Ghana's two biggest cities are being ordered to stay at home for 2 weeks starting on Monday. Residents in the capital, Accra, as well as Kumasi, will only be allowed out to buy food or medicine. India's most populous state, Uttar Pradesh, is laying on 1,000 special buses to help migrant workers who've been stranded by the government's 3-week coronavirus lockdown. Millions have been left jobless and without money by the shutdown, sparking an exodus from major cities. Here's Electra Naismith.
India's population of 1.3 billion was given less than 4 hours' notice of the government lockdown, the biggest imposed in an effort to contain the spread of the virus. But while many of India's millions of poor migrant workers managed to scramble onto trains and buses, huge numbers were left stranded. They've been forced to walk home, the shutdown leaving nowhere open to eat or sleep. The government has urged states to provide food and shelter, but has been criticised for telling others to fix the mess that it has created.
The Taliban say they won't participate in peace talks with an Afghan government team announced on Thursday. The militants said the 21-member team hadn't been selected in a way that included all Afghan factions. They accused the government of violating a recent deal between the Taliban and the United States, although US envoy has praised the team as inclusive. The rejection is a potential setback for the peace process as violence continues. BBC News.
This is The Real Story from the BBC. I'm Rithala Shah with your weekly deep dive into a story that's making news and changing lives. And this week, the world is going into lockdown as the coronavirus spreads.
From 12 midnight, the entire country will go under a complete lockdown.
You must stay at home. We must dramatically increase the hospital capacity, and we have to do it very quickly.
The way we live and work is being radically altered. But is this just a temporary change, or is this crisis sweeping away long-standing assumptions and practices? Scientists are driving rapid policy change. Will the dependence on experts dent the emotive appeal of populist politicians?
Populism has thrived on this idea that expertise was overrated, that elites were incompetent. All of a sudden, it's very difficult to argue that we don't need experts and that we don't need expertise.
As governments ramp up spending and borrowing to pay for dramatic social and medical interventions, will our economic assumptions change? Also, as we find ourselves locked down in our homes, what will be the lasting impact on our relationships and the way we work?
The pace of change has been pretty exponential. And I think COVID-19 is actually putting rocket fuel on that pace even more than it has before.
And could our understanding of our vulnerability in the face of nature persuade us to think differently about climate change?
We have seen the degree to which science now has underpinned this massive global set of interventions coming from governments. And I think we will now be able to say, look, science is not something that you believe in or not believe in. You can't play around with this. If that's what the science tells us, that's what the science tells us.
It's a big, wide space that we're going to traverse this week, but with good reason, because so much is changing so fast. We need to catch glimpses of what's happening before we're blown on to the next thing. So our fellow travellers across this journey, across this field, are Kate Rayworth, an economist and senior research associate at Oxford University, and author of the book Donut Economics, 7 Ways to Think Like a 21st Century Economist. Also on the line is Mitrish Katak, a professor of economics at the London School of Economics, and Winnie Byanyima, the executive director of UNAIDS. She joins us from Geneva. Welcome to you all. I want to ask each of you how the pandemic has affected your life so far. Mitrish.
Oh, it's been a very surreal experience, and one interesting aspect of it is for perhaps the entire lifetime, this is an event where pretty much everybody is facing the same situation. That also creates a certain sense of maybe relating to each other's problems. But yes, it's been pretty severe. It's almost like being under house arrest. Well, it's not as extreme as that. And I would say that we are still lucky to have access to certain services, etc. But it's pretty grim.
Winnie Byanyima, how's it affecting you?
Well, both positively and some negatives. One, I am grounded here in Geneva. I had a lot of travel and many meetings, international meetings were cancelled. But secondly, we are all working virtually, and this is also forcing us to change the way we work as an organization, to move into more virtual ways of working, which is good for many of our staff who hadn't ever tried it. And lastly, my son, 20-year-old son, who goes to Harvard, they were sent home to study from home online, so I get to spend more time with him. Anyone with a 20-year-old knows how hard it is to be with your 20-year-old, so I'm happy to be at home with him.
Indeed, I find myself in a similar situation. Kate Rayworth, how's the pandemic affecting you?
Well, I'm based in Oxford in the UK, and we've been under lockdown for 3-4 days. Schools are closed, and I'm the mother of 11-year-old twins, which means my day is absolutely chock-a-block from start to finish. I used to live in Zanzibar, and I'm thinking a lot of the women there who I know who were always raising the kids, caring for the household, earning an income, cleaning their household, because that is my very full day. Homeschooling my children, they've discovered amazing educational resources online. How lucky we are to have the internet and have that access. But I have to say, the one really good thing, very locally, that's happened, I live in a street that's never really connected. I've always felt very sad that we didn't have a community that I could call my immediate neighborhood. And we have created a WhatsApp group, and suddenly there's a very lively, friendly, warm community up and down the street. We've never even met. So that is something I feel very positive about, and I'm really keen that we sustain it after this emergency.
Some very interesting personal experiences there. Let's move a little bit from the personal to the political, because one feature of politics globally in the recent past has been the rise of populist politicians. The definition of populists and populism is slightly woolly, but we can broadly talk about an appeal to fear, an anti-migrant agenda, and a nationalist flavour. So how will this political phenomenon fare under the current crisis, which is ravaging the whole world? Well, Catherine Fieschi is director of the New Global Policy Institute at Queen Mary University in London, an author of Populocracy, The Tyranny of Authenticity and the Rise of Populism.
I think populism, is a form of politics that essentially separates out, an elite that is depicted as corrupt, inept, and illegitimate, from the will of the people. And it's all of those politics that really capitalize on making the most of that distinction, both on the right, often mainly on the right, but also on the left. So it's a very binary form of politics and a very belligerent form of politics that isn't very kind to minorities. It's a little bit oppressive.
Where would you say it's taken hold around the world?
Well, I think that we've seen populism in various guises. So Italy has done up until now a fine line in it, because they've had both sort of populists on the left in terms of the Five-Star movement, but also populists on the right in terms of Salvini's Lega. We've also seen it happen in France with Marine Le Pen's Rassemblement National. But we've also seen other forms, such as populism in the United States, Donald Trump being a case in point.
But why then do you think this crisis could undermine populism? After all, people are now potentially frightened of one another. They are frightened of foreigners. Countries are closing borders. Isn't this simply fuel to the populist mill?
I don't think it's a given that this will necessarily undermine populism. I think that populism has thrived on this idea that expertise was overrated, that elites were incompetent at best, and often actually, really out to cheat the electorate and cheat the citizens. Obviously, we're in a situation where all of a sudden technocratic government, the input of experts, not just in the medical field, of course, and in public health, but also in terms of the handling of the economy, all of a sudden it's very difficult to argue that we don't need experts and that we don't need expertise. So I think that a lot of the hope in the idea that this coronavirus crisis might undermine populism comes from that, from the idea that this is a rehabilitation of competent government, of technocratic government, and the role of elites. I think that, of course, the populists on various sides of the political spectrum can also try and use this crisis. They can, blame globalization. They can blame porous borders. They can blame foreigners, for the import of the virus. So I think that we're at a really critical juncture, and it's going to depend very much on whether governments are able to explain the measures that they are taking, how they're handling this crisis, not just in getting results, but actually in making sure that they bring citizens and the public along with them, right? Governments are going to be judged on how they've handled this crisis. And in order for that judgment to make any sense, and for people to be able to judge, they'll have to understand what these experts have done. There's an opportunity for governments to say, right, we're going to show you how we share expertise. We're going to get you on board. We're going to communicate what we do. Because that was a lot and is a lot of the drive of populism, is people basically saying, we're locked out, we don't know what's happening. If we don't communicate properly, if we don't really associate people to these decisions, then we're going to be rife with conspiracy theories, and populism will win again.
One of the concerns, though, people have had is that the rise of populism suggests a weakness in democracy being undermined, somehow no longer being valued, and the things that underpin it no longer being valued. But at the same time, you've got governments that have to impose lockdowns, that have to impose draconian restrictions on countries, on citizens who have probably not experienced this since the Second World War. If those governments choose not to roll back from those positions, then that in itself, it might not be populism, but it could be another form of legal and governmental increment that damages what we understand to be liberal democracy.
I think that's a really important point, which is worth making. And that is that we're now in the middle of this crisis, and we are discussing returns to nationalism, returns to technocratic government, returns to populism. I think that we have to let go of this idea that we're going to return to anything. I think whatever emerges from this crisis are things that possibly were emerging anyway. I don't think this crisis is the change. I think that this crisis is the revealer, of the changes that were going on anyway, and it's going to be an accelerator, if you like. We might see a real transformation of politics, which is a different kind of nationalism, a different kind of populism, a different understanding of liberal democracy. For me, the one thing that I know that this points to is that over the past 25, 30 years, we haven't been very good in liberal democracies in securing democratic consent. The best that many governments have been able to do was this idea of there is no alternative. And to some extent, populism is really the mobilization against this idea that there is no alternative. So I think that's the important bit that's going to come out of all of this, is that we're going to have to do much better than we have in the past 25, 30 years to secure consent, and particularly secure consent in what in the next few years might be times of scarcity. You could argue, for example, that in the aftermath of this crisis, that people will be infinitely more compliant and more willing to be tracked and monitored. Or you could argue that actually, they might be much more alert to the dangers of being tracked and monitored. The point is that we're going to have this conversation in a completely different way.
That's Catherine Fieschi from Queen Mary University in London. Kate Rayworth, if I can pick up on that very last idea, it could be that we're in a situation where substance and evidence is everything, but we're giving governments enormous amounts of power. Could it strengthen authoritarianism? Isn't there a straightforward way in which actually big government, powerful government, tips over into authoritarian government?
We're certainly giving governments unprecedented range of power to create lockdown, for example. And if governments communicate exactly why this needs to be done and why this is a successful, competent response to prevent infections, I think most people go along with it and will go along with it for some time. But we don't want to see this become a new normal. As we see different governments around the world responding to this, it's becoming more and more clear that political slogans do not bring down infection rates. It's competent government that does that.